Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. 618. Mic check.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Mrs. Henry, we'll call this meeting to order. Could you please call the roll?
Ms. Hubbard.
Here.
Ms. Hogan.
Here.
Ms. Saunier. Ms. Vowell.
Present.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the on top of your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Williams.
Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to welcome this evening our Project Lead the Way instructor from Gateway Gateway STEM High School, and our first robotics coach and the team. So I want to welcome Mr. Blair, Miss Athena Blair, Brandon House, who is a 10th grader, Serena House, who's a 12th grader, and Asher McFerrin, who's a 12th grader. So I'm going to ask them to come over into the middle of the room, and they are going to share with you some of the wonderful work that they did as part of our first Tech Challenge Team 288 spare parts. And they're going to demonstrate their winning robot and the winning team, the collaboration, the focus, the intentionality that it took to be a winning team. So thank you so much for being here this evening. We are so excited to see their demonstration.
So we are Spare Parts Robotics. We're hosted at Gateway STEM, and we comprise a multitude of St. Louis Public Schools. Both me and Brandon are from Metro. We also have students from CVPA, Collegiate, and obviously students from Gateway STEM like Asher. What we do is robotics. This is part of our game for this year. The goal of the game is to pick up the cones and put them onto the poles. And so basically the goal of our program is to teach students different techniques that they'll use in their careers in different STEM areas, and might not even be in STEM, but you're learning leadership opportunities that you can carry with you anywhere you go. Brandon can tell you more about that.
So on our team, there's many different roles that you can have. So besides the actual robot part, which involves a lot of building, designing, programming, and whatnot, and driving, there's also social media, there's outreach, and there's volunteering. So at the beginning of the season, they always release a new game. So as Serena described, this is the game for this year. And you always start from complete scratch, and you have to design every aspect of the robot. So we use a program called CAD. It's computer aided design. And basically we'll model every single functional element of the robot. And then we'll build it using different CNC technology, machining tools and whatnot. So that's what we use to teach all our new members. And then once the robot is done, you learn how to drive it and program it. And then you go to different competitions. So, yeah.
Recently, we are fresh off our win from our regional, where we won the competition itself by driving and having excellence with that, and our Inspire Award, which highlights the outreach and work we do within the community and within the first community where we share with that. We're going to have Brandon and Serena drive the robot here, and I'm just going to tell you a bit more about what we do with outreach. Essentially, we do a lot of different things when it comes to the more robotic aspect of things. We do open bot shops where we have teams and schools come into our workshop. We teach them the different mechanics of things, advice. We have an extensive workshop that our dear coach has been awesome in cultivating. So we have a lot of things that we're able to show people. We have our holiday toy drive. We do trash pickups around the school, as well as just a whole other multitude of things. And going to do with.
So one cool thing we did this year was actually for the robotics sport as a whole. We designed these tables here that you see. We 3D modeled them and then we cut them out of wood and put on hinges and stuff. And we used our CNC router to cut out logos on it. So we use these methods of creating things to teach students and teach ourselves how to do different techniques like that. And so you can go into a engineering career or anything else and take those techniques with you and start your college knowing things like that that will help you. One of the things we like to say is that we don't build robots, the robots build us, because throughout our team, we cultivate kind of a family. It's really awesome getting to meet all these new people. Last year, we made it to World Championships, which was really exciting. So you really get that global perspective of seeing different people from different cultures doing the same things and having the same interests as you. It's really exciting. Yeah.
One thing that we did with these is we share the tables, we share them to the entire district and region with robotics, or the South region. So what they're currently doing right now is they are picking up the cones, and these cones, as you're seeing, get placed onto these different level poles. They are called junctions. They each have different point tallies that like that 1.5 for each. There are 2 different alliances. There's the red and blue. So right now we're showing you just both cones that we're able to work with. But typically it will be 2 teams allied together against 2 other teams. The field is a little bit larger than this, and it's very, very fun. There's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. First 30 seconds are an autonomous period where the robot will work on itself with the programming. It will read the field, do things without the drivers touching it. Then we have our teleop period where they are doing exactly as you're seeing right now, doing an awesome job of skewering these cones and getting an amazing score. And then during the last 30 seconds, that is the end game period. There's these beacons that are introduced. These you will place on top of a cone, and then you will try to score on one of these, and that will secure the cone for your alliance. And one of the big ways to get a good score is if you complete a circuit, which there's taped off, you can see right here, there's taped off triangles on the edge of each one in the corners. If you complete a circuit from one end to the other of your alliance color, that is 20 points that your team gets. And a good way to secure that is with the beacon, because that's one way that you are able to keep that. Yep.
So one of the cool things you'll notice, you do the limit switch. Yeah, one of the cool things you'll notice about our robot is that the lights change. And so that's something that we have done through programming. There's a limit switch on our intake where when we pull up the cone, it hits that switch and changes the color of the lights. Yeah.
As part of the match, so obviously right now we're driving the robot, but during the match, it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And the first 30 seconds of the match is autonomous. So the robot, you'll set it up and then it'll drive just based on pre-programmed instructions. So you don't touch the controllers at all. You don't touch the robot at all. It just does things based on what it was programmed to do. And then you have the teleoperated period, which is where you drive the robot.
Give more commentary about the team. More fun facts about our team is that we are like one of the oldest teams. You'll notice on Serena's shirt, it says 288, maybe on the robot as well. a lot of team numbers currently that are being made, that are being generated and made every day, they have about 5 or 6 numbers in them. We are one of the oldest sustaining teams in Missouri. We've been around for a while. I mean, the oldest. Okay, I've been I've been corrected. Sometimes it gets confusing because our school is very accomplished and having 2 different types of teams. We have this robot here and then we have the very big robot, which we are currently working on. So sometimes it gets confusing with the 2 teams. There we go.
Yeah, so the program of FIRST starts out as young as 4 years old, which you start out with Lego Robotics, where students in elementary school can build robots using Legos, which is obviously a little easier than from scratch. So they'll start to build on those skills. And then you get into middle school, and middle school is where you start to get into a program like this, which is called First Tech Challenge, FTC. And it's a little bit bigger, a little more responsibility, you learn more skills. And then once you get into high school, that's when you get into FRC, First Robotics Competition, which is big industrial size robots that are like 120 pounds. And yeah, so those are a lot more complicated than these or the FLO robots.
Yeah, so we are Spare Parts Robotics from Gateway STEM. Thank you for your time.
Just want to take a moment again to thank Brandon, Serena, and Asher as we catalyze innovation in STEM, robotics. It is so important to continue to center the voices of our student scholars in this very important work. So this evening, this was perfect. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful segue into our college and career readiness, career and technical education, our workforce development. And so I'm going to invite our Associate Superintendent, Dr. Bender, and the team up to talk a little bit about what we saw this evening and very specifically how we are catalyzing innovation as we think about this work from a pre-K 12 approach. So thank you very much, Dr. Bender and team, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I want to begin by wishing these guys luck. They go to state at Rolla on Saturday, and we are really excited about that. And as the woman that has run the first Lego League tournaments for the last number of years, I could not even come close to pulling it off without these high schoolers who have just been phenomenal help. So thank you to them and good luck. And I'm going to try to get over to Rolla on Saturday. So thank you so much for having College and Career Readiness, CTE Workforce here with you today. I'm here with Director Malpia and Dr. Henning, and we are excited to talk about an area that really is transformational in so many ways. When we started the Office of CCR about 8 years ago, things were very different. And one of the big changes that we have seen is really back towards workforce. We have more students saying they want to enter the workforce. We have, and I think that a lot has to do with wages, and also, unfortunately, so many colleges pricing themselves out of business. So I'll begin with our agenda, which is pretty simple, a basics related to CCR, which most of you probably know, but I will entertain you with that anyway. And then Director Malpia will talk about career and technical education, and Dr. Henning, workforce development. So the basics of CCR, the 3 E's. We ask our students to think about 3 different buckets, or the 3 E's. Where are you thinking you want to go after high school? Are you interested in enrollment? That could be a 2-year program, a 4-year program, a trade program. Maybe it's employment. I want to go directly to work for whatever reason. And we work to not just find them a job. Let's find a career trajectory that you're interested in that can give you a sustaining life wage. You can support a family. We also have a few students, not a lot, that are interested in the military. And if they're interested in the military, sometimes we'll even enlist our JROTC instructors to say, okay, you want to go to the Navy, do this, do that, and really get good advice and make sure we help our students figure out where they want to be. The trackers, that's the second piece of our pie in the work, so to speak. So trackers are set up at 801 by Mr. Brian Kruger. He imports all of the senior classes into a database with test scores, if they are a student in transition, if they have an IEP, who they get services provided by. We have students who maybe are part of College Bound that we are not necessarily aware of, except we get the list and we download it and make sure that the staff is aware. So we want to make sure we know everything about those students, and the tracker really helps us monitor that. That helps us in a number of ways. First off, monitoring what is happening at the school. So these trackers will tell us how many applications, how many FAFSAs are completed. We'll ask questions like, well, if 75% are saying they want to go to college and only 35% have done the FAFSA, we've got a gap. How are we filling that? And it just provides us with really good data to ask questions. That data also provides really important information for MSIP. CCR is a large area of the MSIP. So I'll give you one example. The students are requested very strongly to take at least 2 college assessments. It could be ASVAB, which would be for military, ACT, SAT. There's another test called the AccuPlacer. That is used for the community college in Rankin. And one of the things that Mr. Kruger has done as we monitor and look at the data, he'll look and say, okay, Beth has taken the ACT, she got this score, she got on the AccuPlacer, she got that score. If we turn in the ACT, we would get 0.25 points from MSIP. Oh, but look, when she takes the AccuPlacer, she qualifies for 0.75. So we want to make sure that we are going after the highest points. And in the research and the work of Mr. Kruger, we have found that the AccuPlacer really is a good bang for our buck and is going to be able to provide us with increased scores. Now, we have the students take the assessments for what they want to do in the future, but also making sure that we are cognizant of MSIP and district accreditation. Having the trackers also, as a principal, I would sit with my team. I was at Gateway, and we would go through the tracker. And if I said, hey, can you tell me about Brittany? What's going on with her? And the counselor's like, that tells me something. Probably something I needed to know, didn't want to know probably, but I can say, all right, in 2 weeks, you need to know Brittany's story. Why does she have a 27 on the ACT, but there are no college applications in yet? What is going on? So having an administrator as part of this process is key, and it helps us not lose those students. So the third piece is the post-secondary leadership team. We ask that every school has one and they meet every 2 weeks. In a small school, it could be a 20-minute meeting. In a large school, maybe an hour, but that's where the principal asks those questions. What's going on with this student? Why are there so few of this? What are we doing to increase FAFSA completion? It is really a great way. And that committee, that post-secondary leadership team includes an administrator, counselors, college advisors. At times we might bring in the athletic director if it's related to college athletic eligibility, a special educator, social worker, or even sometimes outside providers who are working with our schools like TRIO or College Bound. All of this helps us really get an idea of our students and where they are and what they're interested in. And that ties in with our next slide related to career and technical education, which is key to CCR.
Thank you, Dr. Brenda. Good evening. As today is the last day of Black History Month, it's also the last day of CTE month. So I just want to take a time and moment to address that. The things that I was asked to cover is the CTE by the numbers and new partnerships that we have coming for 23-24. While we have a lot of different partnerships that we work on, we're concentrating on the ones that we're looking for next year. What I'm excited about is that we are going to be looking at a couple of situations that can remove barriers and create equitable access for our students, and for them to be able to get dual credit, to gain IRCs, and also look at mentoring opportunities for full-time tuition for not just jobs but careers. And she pointed that out, and that's very, very important. And we try to keep that up front, that we're not just looking for students to have jobs, but we want them to have the support to be able to make it into a career. So the first option here that we're talking about is Boeing. So we have been working with Boeing for about 2 years at St. Louis Community College to create a partnership with them. I noticed that we had the national headquarters of Boeing here when I came into this work 3 years ago, and we have the only secondary high school in the country in Gateway that has aviation sitting inside of a high school still. And I asked them the question, why? Why come we haven't brought this together? Why come we aren't doing anything? You have a pre-employment program. And they kind of complained about our kids not going there. And I challenged them to ask them if they would send their kid on a bus, 3 bus rides at 6 in the evening out to North County and come back and would they do that with their kid? And it really changed their hearts. So they really stepped to the plate. And so what we'll be doing is replicating the pre-employment program that says CWI on in North County inside of Gateway STEM High School. Students will, the graduates will, I mean, actually the second semester seniors will start this program at 2:30, right after school. They'll do this program senior year, second semester senior year. And when they graduate, if the kids from the aviation program pass the certifications in aviation and pass the pre-employment program, they will be gainfully employed by Boeing at $24 an hour, full benefits out of the door. And they even moved tuition from 1 year to immediate. And we really appreciated them doing those things. And so in the summer, we also pushed them to give this opportunity to make it more equitable to all St. Louis graduates. So we can actually have up to 16 graduates to be a part of this program in the summer that's not at Gateway in Aviation. So we'll actually run 2 cohorts in this process to be able to give students the opportunity, up to 32 kids, an opportunity to have a really good career. So with Rankin, so just an overview of this partnership that we've been working on. It's been a couple of years. I've been trying to work with them. We haven't had a construction teacher for 2 years. It's just really hard to come by at this point. And so they offered us the plaster building that we could lease to be able to kind of open up this programming for our students. Year 1 will start in 23-24 school year. Second, and we will have 30 to 34 construction students, 15 to 17 kids on A day, 15 to 17 kids on B day. And then if this is successful, we will continue this program and bring in another set of folks, and even look at different program in the manufacturing, machinists, or even an additional construction class. The students will receive dual credit, industry recognized credentials from Rankin. We will also have access there. We are working together to build a Department of Labor apprenticeship where our students can also either enter into their conglomerates for manufacturing, construction, or circle back. More importantly, I've been working with Deputy Watson to make sure that we can fill our own seats where we have HVAC positions and plumber positions and electrician positions, so we can kind of grow our own folks with this situation as well. There's great potential here. It creates equitable access. Instead of being in one place where all 11 high schools students can take part of this. And most importantly, that we can create an MSIP increase through CTA expansion points. And this responds to the Perkins 5 high demand. And then most importantly, it's responding to our students who have a very, very high interest in construction trades. So I just think that I'm really excited about these opportunities for our kids. We are in a very unique position right now with these manufacturing and construction people that really want our kids, and we're just trying to take advantage of it, equip our kids with the skills and certifications they need to be successful.
Thank you, Director Mapia. We've learned that we have to be very creative. The staffing issue, especially with bringing in people from the trades. So you want to bring a nursing instructor in and offer her a teacher's wage. It's a tough sell. So really looking at the trades and being creative in how we develop programs is paramount at this time. An area that has come up quite often in the last 5-6 years that we've had this office is related to Beaumont programming. So we've got programs over there, 3 programs, 4 instructors, and we're regularly asked what our recommendation is. We've not been able to really bounce back from the pandemic with enrollment. Right now we have 52 students. So to help bring increased equity to our schools and to bring career education to more students. So we really would like to explore the idea of redistributing some of those programs to to other high schools where the students are already at. We're only operating maybe at half capacity now, but we feel that if the programs were in the school, that we could probably double that and really get a much better bang for our buck. Low enrollment, transportation, equity are all issues. As I said, this is something that's been discussed for years and needs to be discussed further, but redistribution, things that we have considered and pondered, culinary arts, possibly at Gateway STEM. On the 3rd floor of that school, there is an old kitchen area that has not been used in decades, but the bones are there. Cosmetology, possibly to Vashon. Vashon and Sumner do not have a lot of CTE programs, so that's been a possibility there. And likewise, medical assistant, possibly to Soldan. They have marketing and business is all that they have on those sites. And we regularly hear from principals that they're looking for more programs, but unfortunately, it's one of the downsides of small schools. So you can't have the depth of offerings. Staffing impact would provide to the district another assistant principal in the pool, secretary, a substitute, a safety officer. So it's definitely something we think that needs to be looked at. We have Deputy Watson a year or two ago looked at the costs of moving programs. But at this time, it's just something that we think should be discussed and looked at. And now I turn it over for workforce to Dr. Henning.
I brought a prop. I'll get to that in a minute. Thank you for having me here tonight. So my role is coordinator of workforce development. And the fact that we even have that position in a school district kind of lets you know the direction that a lot of districts are going. And it's really exciting because St. Louis Public Schools is really on the cutting edge of a lot of the workforce conversation. So it has been exciting to be a part of that. And even other districts are reaching out to us on a regular basis, trying to learn some of the lessons and kind of guide their paths as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is quickly go through our current status, kind of our developing partnerships, and then looking towards the future, and then giving a very specific example of an event coming up. So our current status, one of our key programs is the Learn and Earn paid internship program. We have around 500 students that are currently out getting paid. That number was a little bit lower at a few days ago, but we got some more registrations done. So we're actually over the 500 mark, which is really exciting. Students get paid $12 an hour. They're in over 200 different internship sites. And with our numbers where we're at now, we even have the potential to look at having some of those internships continue into the summertime. So some of those seniors who might graduate and not necessarily going to college, or maybe they are, and it's a great experience and they want to continue on. That's something we're looking at as well. For this year, we offered for the first time a soft skills conference called Learn Before You Earn, and I brought a Learn and Earn swag bag, limited edition, so you can see me if you think you might be interested in one. And so what we did is we had about 400 students show up over at the community college, and they did some training before they went out on their internships. And it was just a really exciting 2-day event. We did half the students one day, then half the students the next day. Our partnerships right now, of course, we have with STL Youth Jobs, who bring with them Urban League and MERS Goodwill. They are responsible for implementation of that internship program. And then this year, we have actually developed a relationship with Deli Star. This has been a really, really great relationship. We have 2 interns that are placed there. They stepped up and hosted, well, not hosted, but sponsored some of the internship conference. And so it's just been a really strong developing relationship. Okay, so keeping with the developing theme, we work with the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation. They have given us some openings into some workforce grants, Wells Fargo and Ameren, that have helped with the conference. We have also started to have conversations around future funding, right? So how do we create a pathway for these businesses that are benefiting from our interns? How do we create a pathway for those businesses to support financially? So that's where that conversation is at. We are developing a good relationship with Slate. They have been charged with managing the matching funds that come to the Learn and Earn program. So we have worked with them to make sure that those funds are properly spent and accounted for. Slate has also provided Gateway Go bus passes to our interns. We've actually been able to expand that to targeted groups throughout the district and been able to support some very specific needs around these passes. And then I'll get to this at the very end. They're going to actually host a job fair exclusively for 200 of our seniors. So I'll get to that in a minute. But for these next three partnerships, Dr. Bender, if you want to step back up.
Sure, thank you. So I know Vice President Cousins and I have toured the Procter & Gamble site. They are very eager to work with us. They expect to have about 100 slots that need to be filled this summer. They have an amazing plant with great employee retention. So we're working with them, not just for employment, but also to come in and be guest speakers, help with mock interviews, that kind of thing. The NGA project via Gateway Global. NGA is going to be huge, and getting students to understand that geospatial programming and how all of that works is really beneficial for the students as well as the community. So we're working with them. We also, as I know President Davis and Ms. Cousins know, we've been talking with the AFL-CIO leadership related to, can we do anything with building union diversity? Now that wouldn't necessarily compete with our carpentry programs because it would be on a non-CTE level, probably a semester program. So it's something we're looking at. At present, my last conversation with the union was probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We haven't grown too far on that, but we are always looking for different ways to provide our students opportunities because we do not see our job ending at high school at all. We see it making sure that we are helping our students to provide the kind of livelihood that they need. Dr. Henning?
Okay, so looking forward, so part of what we need to do is to start asking some of those questions of what is the future of workforce and what is our relationship to it here in St. Louis Public Schools. So questions like, okay, what about CTE and CTE centers and expansion? What does that look like? How do we do that in an equitable way? A workforce center, is that something that we're interested in looking into? So just asking some of these questions about expanding opportunities for our students. Our alumni, if they graduate, go to college, and we have some students that come back, what do we have in place for them now? Is there something where we can say, look, you can come here and we can then support you in finding gainful employment and carrying on in pursuing a career? Those are just, some examples of the questions that we need to be asking. And then finally, as future businesses come in, similar to Deli Star. So as they come in, this current mayoral administration has made a very concerted effort around this issue. So as businesses come in, are we prepared for that? Do we have a list of, okay, here's options for how you can engage in our district? So just some of the questions that we need to look forward to. Again, a very exciting time here in St. Louis Public Schools related to workforce. And I want to thank you for your time. And Dr. Bender. I am so sorry. I was ready to end it. Yes, I'm sorry. The career fair. Thank you. So this is an example of when we actually start asking those questions, right? So in the CCR team, we asked, what do we do with these seniors who have said we're not going to college? And so by asking those questions, we started to have conversations with partners, reached out to Slate. They said, hey, let's combine. Let's do an exclusive job fair for 200 seniors. You pick them out. So we are working with the high school counselors, the individuals that know the students the best. They know what's going to be a good fit. And we're going to give 200 students, we're going to rotate them through 50 at a time, give them opportunities to sit across the table with a resume or a resume template from somebody like Procter & Gamble. And possibly Southwest is talking about coming there as well. Some of these city agencies are going to have representation there. So we're going to give them that opportunity to say, okay, here, we're hopefully going to give you something that you can then kind of pursue gainful employment with. So now, again, very exciting time for workforce. Thank you.
So much taller than I am. Any questions?
Dr. Bender, as usual, your work and your team's work is wonderful. I have a question about how we're preparing the seniors for the job fair. What does that look like in terms of getting the resumes ready and getting them prepared for like interview questions and that type of experience?
That has actually been part of the Learn and Earn experience, creating resumes, making sure everybody has that. Plus they do that in their CTE courses. So in Learn and Earn, you have your non-CTE students and your CTE. So they'll come with resumes. Many of the classes do have practice interviews and, you know, the do's and the don'ts. That's part of why, as they've worked on the schedule of that day, to try to make smaller groups, because in a big group, it's very different. But if you can get a student one-on-one or a small group, I think our students perform better, and they perform for themselves and not necessarily others too, which can be distracting at times.
So if I heard correctly, it seems like you were looking at taking the programs existing at Beaumont and splitting them into different locations. It
is something that we're pondering. Yeah, it's been something that has been discussed in the district probably for the last 3 or 4 years. And there's a lot of interconnected pieces with that. So no decision has been made, but it's definitely something we're looking at as MSIP changes and CTE has become very powerful in their points and how the follow-up works. We see great benefit in having students in career and technical ed programs, but trying to figure out how to maximize our usefulness of what we have. So we're looking at it.
So I guess in looking at the potential consideration for moving those programs and allowing them to be offered to other students, and then also looking at a CTE center and a workforce center, where are we thinking that would be located? And are we looking at the number of students who are in proximity of Beaumont, or, you know, I guess where the density is, or it's just pretty scattershot?
The workforce centers or the tech center is something we're looking at. St. Louis is so different than the rest of the state. If you go outstate, virtually every region out there has a tech center, but it also complicates things like MSIP. So there's just a lot of factors there. So it's one of those things that we're really exploring, doing research on, and trying to determine what is best for our students in our district. Still a lot of questions for us to figure out.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering what assets we have that we could leverage, and then, you know, what funding we have that we could, if it's looking like we need to build something new, because I know we've got all of these old buildings and we're trying to be cutting edge and state of the art, but our kids do kind of deserve something brand new and really awesome to be proud of. So I look forward to hearing more as your ideas kind of develop.
Thank you.
Ms. Hubbard, then Ms. Jones, then Ms. Cousins.
Do y'all have any partnerships with the Missouri Extension Service?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
Oh, okay.
Let me write that down. We will find out about it.
Oh, please do.
Okay, great.
And I'm from Mississippi, a rural area. The Extension Service, wherever you live, it takes the research that's being done at universities and translates it into usable information for people who are, you know, Mississippi, it's farming, how, you know, best practices for farming. And I still keep up with what they do in Mississippi, and CTE is a big part of it. So
we utilize the Merrick report and other things. You cannot develop new CTE programs unless you can show student interest, job availability, and the need for it. And those are things that when we hear principals say, oh, I want to start this program, we're like, we've got to cross our T's and dot our I's. But really, we don't want to train students for things that are not going to benefit them. So we really do look at those job reports. We go to the state of the workforce, or with the Director Malpia is on the committee with the school partnership and workforce in the region. And we're really trying to make sure we're looking at all those areas, but we'll look at the extension. Thank you.
My question is in regards to the career fair. I'm just really hoping that eventually you will include middle schoolers along with the high schoolers, because from all the people that I've spoken with in the trades and in different career fields, they always say it's best to try to introduce our students early because I would have loved to have been able to take my own, when my children were young, to a career fair where there were a couple of hundred different type of careers that they could look at, aviation, that kind of thing, mechanics, whatever it might be, robotics. And I'm just really hoping that you might even consider Northwest High School as a tech center. Just throwing it out there.
Yes, ma'am.
Just throwing it out there, but because
we do offer through a project called Learn and Earn, or not Learn and Earn, oh my goodness, Love of Learning, a number of years back. And we're really, the pandemic hit us hard between the district and busing and businesses. But next fall, we will definitely be back at every 7th grader going to a business in the region, because what happens is they drive up to Barnes Hospital and they think, oh, doctors and nurses. Well, there's only about 500 other careers there, and really exposing them to that. So some students will go there, some go to iHeartRadio. They go all over the region, the airport, the airlines, and they learn about careers. So they do that as a 7th grader. 8th grade, they visit a community college in the region, and 9th graders all go to a 4-year college in the region just to get that exposure. We also do careers on wheels at the lower grades, and are looking, actually, we had a terrific meeting a couple weeks ago looking at that kind of vertical integration related to career awareness, because you are so right. It can't start at high school. We need to expose the students at earlier ages. Yes, thank you.
And one other thing that I was thinking about for a long time, I know we talk about career and college readiness, but many of our students are on free and reduced, what have you. And we know today that the president was talking about forgiving student loans because the cost of college is so very high. And we know so many of our young people, even when my children were students, a lot of their friends and even them had to drop out because of the cost of college.
Yes.
And so how many really do finish? You want them to finish, but a lot of them don't. And so what I'm hoping is we will also try to emphasize entrepreneurship while they're in high school, even in middle school, to because I mean, I had an opportunity to visit a foreign country where there was no food stamps and there was no public assistance or anything like that. And people were very creative in terms of making money. And I don't see why our students couldn't learn how to be entrepreneurs before they get out of high school.
And we do have some entrepreneur programs, and I think you're right. That is an area that can grow as we coach students too on college. For instance, if I was coaching a student about college and we looked at their award letters and such, we never recommend that they borrow more than $10,000 a year. And when they try to, we really do everything we can to dissuade them. And even to the point, a few years ago, we had some students that insisted to go up to a school in the Chicago area. We told them no. Outside providers are like, no, that's too much money. And the college kept saying it will be fine. They were back in November with 0 credit and a lot of debt. So we pretty much sent the word to the college advisors. We don't play with that school anymore. They don't take care of our children. We also know that economics is very serious. So we keep a running list of employers that will pay for you to go to college. Some on day one, some you have to work there 6 months or a year. But if that is an issue, we try to help students find that other path.
Who does the follow-up after the student leaves the district or they've been in the CTE program to find out if the that particular job or career that you were preparing them for actually panned out?
That is part of the MSIP process. That is the 180-day follow-up. It starts with Deputy Van Noy pulling information from the clearinghouse, which is a national database. Mr. Kruger imports that. We send that out to the schools, the counselors, college, or the Sometimes the CTE teachers are able to tell us what the students are doing. And then a lot of us just do a lot of, I did some phone calling myself and said, hey, you know, what is Donna up to now? And sometimes the mom would say, she's right here. Do you want to talk to her? And other times they'll be like, oh, here's the cell phone number. They're working here. They're doing great, or they're at Mizzou. So we do the follow-up, and that also helps us reflect on our work. Now, MSIP is changing, and we will have to do a follow-up further out, not just at 180 days as part of that process. And they also look, it impacts our career and technical education funding. So if Natalie's in a program in business, and then she goes off into the arts, for some reason, the state does not like that. You know, business and arts actually do tie in together, but those kind of things can be hard, and the state can be particular at times, but we really do, we follow up, and we got this year, I think Deputy Van Noy, what about 93% of our students reached. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Bender, I do want to piggyback on what Ms. Brittany said. You guys have done an excellent job in moving the CTE program forward. There is so much more work that could be done and need to be done, but I do see the impact that you all have been making in just a year from last year's presentation as opposed to this year's presentation. I do see the growth that you're doing with Procter & Gamble, NGA, and AFL-CIO. I think Ms. Jones, that's kind of supporting what you're asking for in regards to Northwest. I know that's hopefully something to come within the fall as a discussion of what that looks like. I think the question that I have are just kind of two. One is, you're saying the job fair and there's 200 students, and I think this goes behind you. Man, why did his name just? Dr. Henney, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay.
Dr. Henney, the 200, where are we on that? Or have we exceeded our 200? Do we think we need additional space, or have we not even, made it to that threshold of 200?
We haven't made it there yet. So a part of our focus is trying to really get those 200 students that are
ready.
Yeah. So there are specific kind of schools that we've kind of given a little bit first crack at that are trying to fill as many slots as they can. So just trying to make sure we're giving some of our young people opportunities to really kind of enter that space.
Because and I want to make sure I understand the goal of that. The goal of that is long-term employment. Because of them being seniors, the hope is for the job fair to have long-term employment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and my other question, I heard you all, I'm not quite sure who brought this in their presentation, but it was in regards to Urban League, MERS Goodwill, and STL Youth, the implementation piece. I'm trying to get a clear understanding of really what role they actually play in the process. I know in the past, it was presented, I guess, that they're the ones actually processing payroll, so to speak. So I'm trying to get a clear understanding of what implementation role do they actually play when it comes to the CTE?
Sure. So when it comes to CTE or all around? Okay. So MERS Goodwill and Urban League, they subcontract with STL Youth Jobs. They cover the payroll for CTE students. So it's kind of split. About 150 of the students are covered by MERS. The remainder are covered by Urban League. We broke it down this year so that each of those payroll providers, they cover an entire school. So for example, Gateway STEM has about 100 interns, somewhere around there. Of those 100 interns, I think about 80 are CTE. The other 20 are not in CTE pathways, but still want to be a part of internships. So that's a CTE heavy school. You flip over to McKinley and there's like 4 or 5 CTE interns. It's heavy in just traditional students. So for those traditional students, Urban League and MERS Goodwill also provide job coaches. The placement, the management of all of the businesses, the registration of all the students, the training of them, the software, the curriculum they receive. That's STL Youth Jobs. And so really it's MERS and Urban League function as job coaches and as payroll providers.
And I see in here that STL Youth provide pre and post surveys.
Correct.
Are we taking that and utilizing that data to kind of see what's working, what's not working? Is that kind of a reflection and supporting what we're looking, to the future of what the program looks like? Because I know one of our concerns and one of my concerns in the past was the 1.6 million from us and 1.6 million from the city. And I still wasn't seeing like the numbers being met. Like we were saying that they meaning STL Youth was supposed to identify X amount of jobs or whatever for, or non-traditional, not counting CTE. So I'm trying to make sure that they're providing the adequate services that we're looking for them to be providing for our students.
Sure.
And we have the data to support what they're actually looking to do.
Yeah. No, so part of the issue is we have students who, you have to fund for up to 600 students. They can work up to 25 hours a week for 12 weeks at $12 an hour. Well, most students, even in their CTE programs, once you throw in days that are off, you throw in spring break, you throw in all these, different breaks, they're not getting to 25 hours a week. So that's where, we have to initially fund it, have the structure in place to meet that. But the reality is we don't see those actual numbers being played out in terms of the hours. So that's why, for example, we had about $700,000 last year because we ran at about 400 students. So that's where you're going to see that. And that money doesn't get paid out, of course, that money stays here with the districts. Then we work with the city. If it's city money, we look at, okay, what steps can we do to more effectively use that money? So for example, doing the 25 interns this fall, we kind of piloted that. So we gave some students a year-long opportunity. Looking at potentially this summer, is there an opportunity where we can look and say, hey, let's extend some of those internships that could lead to something better for those students? And in terms of the pre and post data, we use that along with all of our Learn and Earn interns are marked in that tracker that you've been hearing a lot about tonight. So any data that we want to pull on those interns, we can look at it, kind of aggregated, disaggregated based on their involvement in this program as well. So we take that data along with a little more of the qualitative data, the surveys, and we use that to inform, what changes need to be made. So for example, doing a conference, as opposed to going to every school, that was directly from student feedback from last year saying, we didn't like this. This was boring. We sat in a cafeteria for 2 days and we didn't, but this year you get to go and have a keynote speaker and you get to interact with each other and, get that feel of a professional conference. So that's an example of how we take that data and then we try to use it to inform some of those decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add on and say thank you all. I always appreciate your flexibility, your creativity, but I know Ms. Cousins and I have met with you and worked with you. You've instructed us on a lot of things. You've answered our questions, and I think you've sort of taken sort of our concerns. I do want to just sort of express too, as you continue on that and look at these sort of big picture items about where our program's located, the difficulty in having these spread out across 12 different buildings across the city. Please lean into us to help us with that, because we're always happy to make the hard decisions that I think sometimes people around here are afraid to do. But if it's in the best interest of the students, we have to do it. So thank you for always being honest with us about that, and I hope I know we will continue that.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. Bender, Mr. Malvia, and Dr. Henning. It's wonderful that we can frame high quality comprehensive work we're engaged in to create pathways in our career technical education programs and workforce development program that will certainly lead students to an industry credential or a post-secondary degree. That's our goal. So thank you very much. Our next presenter, I'm going to invite Dr. Marty Casey to come to the podium. At our February 14th board meeting, our board requested that we invite you, Dr. Casey, to really share some of the work that you're doing, the core mission and work of the organization, and the request to partner with the St. Louis Public Schools. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome, Dr. Casey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be here before you tonight. As we get ready to go through the slides, I'm going to try to stick as close to the slides as I possibly can so that I can leave enough time in the end for any questions. The reason being is that, as you can see, this is gun violence prevention in schools. Before I can even move to the next slide, I want to break that down a little bit. I'm concerned about all violence in schools. We know that gun violence is not the only type of way that we can perpetrate and hurt each other. But when it leads up to gun violence, we know that that can truly lead up to death. Prevention, that's an interesting word to me because I wish that I could put healing.
Thank you so much. I didn't want to break it. I was trying to figure out how to bend that down. All right. So there we go. Prevention. Ungun Institute, what we do, our process is really looking at the healing piece, the unresolved trauma, because that's what leads to gun violence. And then as we say in schools, I can't just leave it at in schools. I have to consider the homes. I have to consider the communities. I have to consider everywhere there are hurt people, healed people, heal people. So we can move on to the next slide. Cheryl, thank you in advance for assisting me with that. And the reason that I have Cheryl assisting me is because I'm very passionate about this work that we do at Ungun Institute, because it's very personal for me. Gun violence was not just something that I woke up and said I wanted to deal with. It was a situation that it found me. My great grandmother, when I was 8 years old, was gunned down in her home over a black and white television. And you fast forward in our community, my brother, unfortunately, through self-defense, he had a murder, took a life. I've seen too much of this and not enough solutions. So that's what brings me here. So we're going to start with the agenda on the introduction, the recap of 2022 services provided by SLPS, the data from the past services, the lessons learned, and the slow down, stand back. I'm too, okay, I am an actress and I am used for theater. I am used to projecting. All right, 2023 and the 2024 plan. Is that better? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So the introduction, Ungun Institute LLC was founded in 2020 as a youth and community development organization that helps participants to release trauma from violence in the mind, the body, and spirit. We support individuals and communities by engaging in the arts, building connection, and fostering communication to achieve positive outcomes for healthy relationships. Next slide. The recap of 2022 services is a 6-week program that was provided for each site. It was offered in 7 schools. There were 4 middle schools, Compton Drew, Carlane, La Overture, Yateman. Our high schools was Carnahan, Soldan, and Sumner. We did not choose the schools. The schools were given to us to service. What I definitely would like to point out right now is that what we realized, there were a different temperament in every school. There is no one size fit all to the work that we are doing. The sessions were held once per week, 1-hour sessions, and the students were selected by the staff and the administration per site. Next slide. The data from the past services, the overview. An average of 25 students per site was serviced during the program. Students were surveyed to acquire the data about the following: student exposure to firearms and safety, student engagement in violence or bullying, student emotional well-being and check-in. Before we move on to the next slide, I have to mention What we're getting ready to add is one of the things that we found out. Social media plays such a major part in where the violence began, those broken relationships, what happens, the communication, that breakdown is so important that we added that social media piece in that I'll be speaking about in just a moment. But I wanted you to know that it's because of that bullying piece, and that is also important. So again, as we're talking about gun violence, we know bullying can lead to that. Next slide. The data from the past services. One of the questions that we asked is how many students have been exposed to gun violence? We asked 63 students. 14 of them feared about guns in their community. They were fine with concerning guns. That's what 30 said. They were fascinated about the guns. That's what 4 said. They don't think about guns at all. That's what 10 said. And didn't answer the question. That was 5. Out of everyone who answered, we're most concerned with the 5 who did not answer at all. That lets us know that there are still major issues of expressing themselves regarding guns. Next slide. How many students feel safe around guns? Again, 63 answered. 23 of them said that they feel that there is a difference in safety at school versus home. And 40 of them said they felt that it was the same at school and home. That's going to be a very interesting question to ask moving into if we get an opportunity to move into the schools again, because now this is post Central Visual Performing Arts shooting. That's going to be very interesting. Who knew that at home they may have been safer than they were at their school? Next slide. When you are posting on social media, how do you feel about guns? Again, 63. 8 of them said that they fear posting about guns on social media. 25 of them said they feel fine about guns regarding social media. 5 said they are fascinated by social media posts, including guns. We see that by the different videos that are being posted. There's a video that's going around right now that's quite concerning, with individuals holding all types of firearms, the lack of safety, that anyone can get shot and get hurt just being in the vicinity. 23 of them, and then 2 of them said that didn't answer the question at all. Again, I'm really concerned about those 2. Next slide. Overall, how did you rate the session on gun violence prevention provided by UnGun? 63 answered, 12 said it was excellent, 47 said it was good, 4 said it was fair, and no one said it was poor. Well, we're excited about that, but it would be great if we can get everyone to a place of saying it's excellent, because that tells us that we are moving up that safety piece in individuals and how they relate to the safety of guns in their schools and in their homes. Next slide. These are the lessons learned. What worked well? The 1-hour session worked well. I wish we could have at least 90 minutes with the individuals, but again, we understand that there's very limited time. A non-co-ed session. We had a couple of schools where we actually serviced just all boys. And that worked very, very well. Where there was co-ed mixing in the girls, I believe sometimes it just made it a little uneasy for them to really be honest about what was going on with them and how they felt about it. So that's something that we want to consider. Snacks being available. Snacks are always good. That's good for me and my staff, as well as the children. So, but what we do realize is that we want to make sure we give those snacks at the end after they've done their surveys. The inclusion of arts and games, you have to make it fun. You have to make it relatable. One of the reasons that's important is because it's hard to talk about your hurt and pain and what you've been through. The very first day that we went inside, and you'll see this on one of the pictures in a moment, we actually gave each of the children a sticky note. And we said, do not put your name on it. But what we want you to do is to write down anything that you feel is still stuck in your mind, your body, and your spirit, that you're coming to school with, that baggage that you're carrying in every day. Because as much as I love what we just saw before us, the presentation, I would have been one of the children that would have wanted to be a part of something that great and awesome, but I would not have been able to because my trauma would have stood in the way. And there's so many children that we face and we see that on a daily basis. So when we had them to write down on that sticky note, we found out on the first day, one of the children had been shot in the face when she was pregnant at the age of 15 by her boyfriend on a Wednesday. And by Friday, her grandmother, who was raising her, died in her arms. All of this was on a sticky note. I had no clue who she was. But as I continue to pay attention to what has been written and we're showing back up, I could start to recognize who it may have been. And I was correct. I still today, after she graduated last year, I mentor her. She still calls and she tells me how she's doing. That's how I know that our program had impact, because this baby showed up to school every day because school became her safe place. But the trauma never disappeared. See, that last week of school, she ended up in a fight. And the principal, when I got there for our program, said, "Oh, Dr. Marty, she's out. She's going to be suspended. She won't even be able to go to prom on Saturday, and she won't be able to walk across the stage." And I said, if that is the stance that you all take, what is the purpose of my program being in this school? You have to give a program like Ungun Institute an opportunity to work with them and for them. I am asking that you allow this baby to go to prom that she's been preparing for and to graduate. And I am willing to stick my neck out for this individual because I see the changes every week. I'm happy to say that that school and the staff made the right decision. She got a chance to go to prom. Then they sent her home for the rest of the school year and she got a chance to walk. Do you know the reason that she was still coming to school with all of that trauma? Again, not only was it her safe place, but it was the carrot that was dangling in front of her. She needed a win. And that was her win. If I could just go to prom and see myself dressed up and accomplish something, if I can just graduate in spite of being shot in my face and having a 3-year-old baby in my senior year, and losing my grandmother who took me in when my mother could not raise me. She just needed a win. And it took Ungun Institute to be inside in order to talk to the staff to say, we stand with her. You stand with us because we stand with you. This has to be a village approach. Not only just with the staff and Ungun, but also with you. The visual aids, the awareness of school policies. I want to get back to that. The awareness of school policies work well. When we don't know what a child is able to do, it can bring about more friction and more trauma or being triggered. If a school principal allows them to wear hoods, we need to know that in advance. The reason we ask them to remove their hoods, we don't know the children. And so we're looking at their body language, we're looking at their participation, and so we need to see the whole child. Visual aids promoting Ungun methods is also important. As we teach these tools and techniques, it would be great to see them throughout the school in the halls, on the walls, so that it can be reinforced. Opportunities for improvement. Paper delivery of surveys is a must because the teachers are so busy and they have so much going on already. It's very difficult to come in with an outside resource to say, hey, by the way, we need these surveys by this time. So if we can deliver those through a paper survey, we can make sure that that's done because this data is very important. Time included in the session for the pre and post surveys goes along with that piece, and the consistent administrative support on each site is also important. Sometimes we would go to a site and we may have one staff member for 2 weeks and then no staff member. And then maybe the last 3 weeks, we may have a different staff member. It would be great to have the same person if we could, because we can then also survey them to see what works and what didn't work. Everyone weighing in on this is so important. Space accommodation for large groups is also important. One time we were in a space that did not accommodate for what we come to do that week. The session rules established by the ungun facilitator. With me today is April Casey, no relation, different spelling of Casey, but April is a former police officer who will be teaching the gun safety. It is important for her, because she's dealing with gun safety, that she comes in to establish what is needed in that room that day. Not Dr. Marty, not the principal, but the facilitator. An individual motivation of the students to participate. That's important. We need buy-in and weigh-in from the school, as well as the parents, as well as you all on the board, the community as a whole. We want them to know that the tools and the techniques that you're receiving from Ungun Institute could possibly save your life. I can't swim. I got on the back of a jet ski and I fell in the ocean, but I had a life jacket on. That's the reason I'm standing here today. Why did I get on the back of that jet ski knowing I can't swim? Because it was fun, because it was interesting, because I wanted to. Why do they pick up guns and they know nothing about guns? Because it's available, it's accessible, because it looks fun, it looks interesting, but it's that safety jacket we must make sure that they have. Next slide. Those are those circles that I was telling you about. As you see, no names are on them. Every story is different. Every story is concerning, even the ones that said, I'm okay. Trauma's transferable, and so is healing. There's absolutely no way we could be okay in this room right now if 3 people have COVID. We would actually do COVID tracing to see who was sitting near them, who was around them. Why aren't we doing trauma tracing to find out what these children are going through and dealing with on a daily basis, so that we can help them to quarantine emotionally? That's how we keep ourselves and them safe, by being engaged and knowing how they're feeling, because they bring their feelings to school. And when they come to school and they're hurt and they're in pain, that can result into gun violence. So it's important for us to put those things in place in advance. As you can see, that middle picture up top, look at the hands. Look, read the body language. I didn't say raise your hand. I'm reading something. They're ready to ask a question. They were engaged. The third picture up top, they were doing one of our assignments. Every head was down. Not anyone was looking around, because the things that we bring to and I believe this particular one, it's where they change their story to fit a well-known story, like the Little Red Riding Hood or the 3 Little Pigs. They get to tell us about what they're dealing with and what they're going through by them telling us their story. At the bottom, we're having fun. We're playing games, boys against girls. I believe the girls won. And then on that other, the last picture, I want you to read the body language. This is our last day. They were all willing to put their shirts on, but they're like, oh, she's taking a picture. I don't know if I want everybody to know I actually had fun in this place over the last 5 weeks. Read the body language. But what I'm happy to announce, none of those young men, none of them got killed over the summer. So when we talk about impact, there it is. Next slide. All right. This is our planned session for 2023 and 2024. Week 1, Ungun is going to do an introduction of the mind, body, and spirit, very similar to what we did last time. This is where we introduce the students to our methods and give a little bit about, who we are and why Ungun is necessary. This is where we also establish personal connections. What's interesting is that it doesn't take long to make a connection with these babies. They're willing to have someone talk to them about the thing they fear the most. They're willing to talk about it. Week 2, this is where we do personal story projects, where we apply creative storytelling to establish a safe environment for the students to share their personal stories. Week 3, we talk about the pitfalls of social media and the success techniques. This is going to be a really important one here, and expose the students to positive use of social media and provide an alternative way to utilize social media, including conflict resolution. Next slide. Week 4, this is the techniques for gun safety. Again, will be led by April Casey. This is where she will expose the students to reasons for gun safety, state laws, and techniques for gun safety. Week 5, entrepreneurship. See, it's important after we teach them how to ungun the trauma. We need to also help them to find out what's next for them, because life is going to feel and look a little different. So we want to set them up for a win. This is where we stay with them and we make sure that we connect them with others in the community and something that they're interested in, so that they can now utilize their gifts and talents to become a positive citizen outside of school. Week 6, the overview and wrap up and reflections. This is where we summarize the previous weeks and experiences to ensure positive outcomes for each individual. And this is also where we provide that one-on-one. This is the week I'm looking forward to. And that session right there, when we do that one-on-one, this is where we really find out how effective the work that we did really is. Next slide. This is what our outline sessions will look like each week. The intro to the facilitator, where we then introduce the tools. We'll take 10 minutes in doing that. The activity breaks down to 30 minutes, and then we leave time for the Q&A for 10 minutes. And then 5, that post survey, that's going to be important. We want to make sure we take 5 minutes to ask them each thing we come in every week and do. We want to know, how did they feel about it? How did it help? What did they learn from it? That is going to be really important tracking. Next slide. How will we measure results from 2023 and 2024? Overall, that pre and post survey will be conducted at the beginning and the end of the program with the students and staff. We want to add the staff in on this again. Again, this is a collective. We're talking about all of us. I'd be interested to know how you feel about it in the beginning, and then come back and see how you felt about it after we finish. Your weigh in is just as important. The weekly surveys administrated at the end of each session for the student completion. Interviews with the student and site facilitators and volunteers. Now, I don't know if that's allowed. That's something that, you all will have to let me know after, I guess, speaking to the attorneys, if that could be allowed. But I believe that it's important, because we can ask questions and they can answer on paper. But until you see the full response of the body and the tone and the way they deliver, that's when you will really understand what's going on with those children. And I really advocate that somehow we try to get a yes on those interviews. Even if you all keep that, we don't do anything with it, that's all yours. But I think that's in-house, that needs to happen. Data collection and analysts for the program report. That's going to be also important. Next slide. And this is where you get to ask me questions, and we'll do our best to have comments for you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you today. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure.
Questions for Dr. Casey? Ms. Jones.
I had a question. I like a lot of the things that I heard about the program. I really feel like it's needed. Even after you spoke, I thought about the students as central that went up to Jefferson City today to talk about the effects on gun violence on them and how it's been long lasting. And I feel so many times that a lot of our students are not heard, and we have so many students that are full of trauma. I wanted to know, what does your session look like when you start talking about guns? Because you said a lot of them are fascinated, some are not a lot, but some are fascinated by guns. Do you actually show them the proper use or how to protect themselves when you have a gun in your presence?
Yes, that's part of the course is teaching gun safety, is that if they do come in contact with a gun, what the do's and don'ts are. And that is to protect, to ensure that they don't harm themselves and don't accidentally harm somebody else. And what they are to do if they do come across a gun and under various circumstances, how they should handle it. Again, to keep themselves out of legal trouble as well as to keep themselves safe.
Do you have lawyers that work with you to talk to the students about the implications of gun violence in their lives?
We do have, essentially what we do is we'll give what the current state statutes are. And essentially kind of also work with juvenile in saying, depending on the age of the students, because obviously depending on their age is going to depend on how they're handled in the system, and what those consequences can be if the wrong decision is made. Because a lot of them do have questions because, again, of what they're seeing on social media, what they see on the news. They're like, oh, well, I heard this person, only got this. Well, that exactly wasn't the whole complete story. That's only what you saw on television, but that's not really what happens in reality. So giving them those information, because a lot of them are curious, and a lot of them have now understood what they thought was the facts. They now understand, oh, this is more serious than what I was led to believe. I can get into serious trouble and it can affect the rest of my life. And it can prevent me from getting quality employment and being able to provide when I'm 19, 20, 22, 25, or decide to have a family. It could affect where I live because, again, a lot of communities are changing laws that if you have certain convictions, you are not allowed to stay there. So it allows them to understand the lifelong effects that those choices can have.
I appreciate the conversation about the videos as well, because I was able to stand in my yard and watch a group of young teenagers on top of a roof with guns. And it was like they were so excited. And I kept thinking, what are they thinking in their mind? They were so excited about, and they felt powerful. So when you're talking to the children or the young people about guns, how do you talk to them about their feelings? Why do they feel like they need to have a gun? Because so many of them that I know, even in my own family, they carry guns to protect themselves from other young people at school.
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, you have to be relatable. And so we lead in almost everyone on my team. We have history dealing with gun violence. Like for me, unfortunately, like I stated, my brother actually had gone away for a murder for 3 years. Someone on my team, her brother and her father was shot and killed. Someone on my team, her son was shot and killed. And someone on my team, he was shot by his best friend, and he still has the bullet lodged inside of him today. So when we lean in with our stories, they understand we're not just coming in with paperwork, talking about something that we heard about. We're coming in sharing with them our stories, which makes us relatable, and it then allows them to open up. So that's really how we lead off with that. It's building that connection that we were talking about. You have to have that relationship in order to reach them. Two of the things that I feel is so necessary that we don't always consider, we have to change the environment, and then they have to be willing to heal. And so when the environment changes and they're willing to heal, then we can start to see a different relationship that they will have with guns. But as long as you're in an environment where you feel your environment is unsafe and everybody in the neighborhood is carrying a gun, well, surely I got to have mine too. And I have young guys that have said to me, Dr. Marnie, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't go anywhere without my gun. I'll leave my cell phone at home, but I will not leave my firearm. And that's being honest. But this is why we have to have someone like April on our team to come and let them know the risk that you're taking. You're basically setting yourself up for failure and throwing your whole life away because you are living in a world of fear and paranoia. I'm pronoia. Pronoia means I believe there's more good going on in the world. This is why I am a global peace ambassador. But I started off being paranoid because of my trauma, my unresolved trauma. So I know the difference in the two. They live a life of being paranoid. And so it's like I got to prepare just in case. So that's the mindset that we're dealing with. So how do we go in and change that mindset? I got to set them up for a win. I have to tap into their gifts and talents. That's where the arts come in. When we introduce them to the things that's already inside them that we can actually help them to increase and pull out, this increases their value. Now they're saying, you know what? It's not worth me going to jail because I basically look like I might have a rap career going on here. So this is how we begin to change the mindset.
My last question is about entrepreneurship. What type of things do you talk about in regards to?
So two of the individuals that we have lined up to come in is the Woke brand. I don't know if you're familiar with the Woke brand. They are in the Galleria and they make patches. And then we also have someone that makes t-shirts, basically does like a mashup with design. And so the children get to be the designer. They will learn how to work with different fabrics. They will actually have an opportunity to make their piece, take their piece home. And so when they start to see their own creation tangible in their hand and can see, wow, I didn't know I could do this. It's just like the robotics. To see those individuals present today, they presented from a place of confidence. We got to get these babies to a place of confidence. We got to deal with that piece first. And then we can help them to understand really how to handle a firearm, when it's necessary and when it's not. But we have to deal with the thing that is screaming at us right now, and that's the hurt and pain.
I appreciate your honest feedback about some of the opportunities or struggles that you've had sort of working in the buildings. I wonder, do you encounter students where their level of trauma is such that they need additional support? And if so, are you able to work with people in the school to make sure that they get that support?
Absolutely. Actually, we have had several students where we could truly see that there was some additional services that needed to be had for them. And that's when we go and meet with the counselors and the social workers. Again, they know their students, they know their history, they know their past. And what I find very interesting, Mr. Davis, is that at one of the schools where we had that as a situation, the social worker actually, after our program was over with, when school started, one of the young men that was in our program, when he came back, he had lost over the summer, like I think 3 or 4 individuals in his family. The social worker called me back and said, Dr. Marty, are you willing to come in and talk with him because he truly honors and respects the connection that you made with him? And now that same school asked if I could come back and offer a program for their leadership. They want to would like for me to build a leadership program. And I told them I can't do anything until I talk to the board. I don't want to do anything to mess up, the opportunity to come back in to service through the gun violence piece. But that just goes to show you that what we did was effective. Those connections were made. Those relationships are being had. And the social workers, just like I had to contact them to tell them what was going on with the young man, they then called me back to work with them to continue to service the young man.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Marty, I always appreciate your work, and I appreciate you meeting students where they are, because I can tell that you're culturally cognizant of the need for these students, like Donna mentioned, to carry guns or to feel that they are around them. And I appreciate the approach to safety versus just saying, never touch a gun, just they don't exist. They do exist, and it is a very real issue. So I appreciate that. But as far as this goes with fitting into their academic schedule, and how we could maybe broaden that. Is there like a free period during the day where students are coming to you? Is this after school entirely? I kind of missed that part.
So the school gets to decide when we come to service the children. They tell us the hour that we can come in according to where it fits for those children to be available. But to your point, Natalie, what I would also like to see if we could have an extended program and maybe even offering after school. So because again, there are so many things we don't have enough time sometimes to really dig into the situation and really provide those children with the time that they need. And so if we were able to still kind of be around and offer it through a after school program, that's something that could also possibly be looked at a later date.
So, and that kind of goes right into the next thing I was going to ask. I know that some of these students are identified by their teachers, counselors, and school staff.
Sure.
If the program were to continue, do you think it would be beneficial if students were able to self-select and sign up? Because some of them may be carrying things around that they are not talking to counselors about, that their teachers may not always be aware of, but they hear this cool program that somebody they know is going to. Maybe they participate and they feel a little bit safer that way.
No, I don't think that would work at all. I think we would have 2 students if they had to choose to come into, because
No,
even
I mean, in addition to just opening it up to additional students, not
open it
taking
up.
out
Absolutely. Yeah, we would definitely love to see this be available for all students, because again, trauma is transferable, and so is healing. So if we're helping 25 to 50 students inside of the school with proper tools and techniques, practical tools and techniques, but none of the other students understand the language. That's why it's important for us to at least have some of our, some of our tools and techniques up on the wall so that you can actually engage and make other students curious about it. I'm going to show you one quick thing. When we responded to Central Visual Performing Arts, I was one of the individuals that went out on site that day when the parents was picking them up. And I was very intentional, like, I don't want to show up and be a part of everything that's going on right now and add more chaos. I needed to make sure that I took something that was tangible that I could hand out and get out of the way. And we passed out these check-in cards. And so I gave these to the parents and I said, over the next few days and maybe even few weeks, your children are going to have a hard time expressing verbally how they feel. Just allow them to send you a heart, to text that to you. It gives you an opportunity to check in with your child. This conversation starts with them on identifying how they feel. You're able to receive that, and then you can develop how you need to address it. And because we passed this out and because it was so effective, I received a grant that I didn't even ask for, because another organization saw that we were able to physically provide something that helped. And that's what we need to do more of. Can you imagine if this was posted at the front of the school, and somehow we can make sure every child coming in that morning sends that heart. Now, who gets that heart? If that's the secretary or if that's the social worker or whomever that is, I don't know. But imagine, now you will know who's feeling a certain way and what they're dealing with coming into the door. You may find out that if half the students sent purple, black, and brown, something had happened in their community. You need to find out what that was. And then on top of that, then maybe this needs to be a self-care day. Maybe we need to take that extra hour and make it a self-care day. The more information we have, the more resources we will be able to provide and meet them where they are.
So I appreciate that. And my last question is, obviously the school's job is to provide academic excellence and make sure our students succeed in the classroom. Are we doing any tracking of how this program, where students are, if they're, making season Ds when they come into the Ungun program, where they come out academically? You talked about having that life jacket, that carrot, that having a win. Are we finding that there is a measure, or is there staff that is doing any measuring of the academic improvement or engagement or attendance or anything?
We did not, but we could definitely add that piece. I think that's really, really important because that's definitely a way that we can measure. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Casey. We really appreciate your presentation this evening on the Ungun Institute. Thank you again for centering the importance of teaching about gun safety and gun violence prevention in our schools and at home. So thank you for being here this evening. I'm going to invite our Chief Financial Officer, Mrs. Angie Banks, to the podium. Before she begins her presentation, which I know will be very brief and intentional, I do want to take a moment just to recognize Angie Banks and Victoria Glassby and the full team. The Association of School Business Officials International awarded a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, and the Government Finance Officers Association awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, both to our board and our district under Mrs. Banks's leadership. The certificates indicate that the district published an easily readable and efficiently organized annual comprehensive financial report. The report satisfies both generally accepted accounting principles and applicable legal documents. And so you'll see why this is so important as our Chief Financial Officer frames our preliminary FY 2023-24 revenue and budgets for this school year. Thank you very much, Mrs. Banks.
Well, good evening. As a Rolla engineering graduate, I'd first like to say congratulations to Gateway. I certainly understand those competitions down in Rolla. I sure can't build or, program a robot, but I'm okay with budgets. So 2024 budget, here we go. So our financial objectives support the overall district plan, full accreditation, transformation plan, financial stability, and high expectations for students and staff. And I know we've talked about fund balance quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I did just want to take a moment to talk about its continued growth. So the 30% fund balance policy is what we currently have. We were at 28% in fiscal year 2019, and we've grown to 47% as of June 30, 2022. There's a lot of reasons for that, starting all the way back to the voter approved tax levy increase back in 2016. There's been lots of activity in Jefferson City that has brought in a number of grants over the last couple of years. We've had the pandemic, all the shortages in staffing. We have the ESSER funds, and now we have Prop S funds. So all of that works to offset some of our just general operating budget. So that has put us in a really strong financial position and has allowed us to really do some unprecedented things. And I guess the thing I wanted to mention is that I want to make sure that as we are in such a strong financial position and lots of different things are being considered, programs, new ideas, and lots of stuff that I'm hearing, that we continue to be strategic and consider long-term implications and the financial sustainability of any of the programs that are going to be under consideration. Certainly all districts are really the benefactors of all these different factors and have been growing their fund balances. If you consider going from the highest fund balance to the lowest, St. Louis Public Schools like number 303 out of 554, and that was probably effective at the end of the fiscal year 21 year. So still below the middle of the pack, but it's all good. Okay, so let's jump into our fund categories. On this slide, we have our major fund categories and what percentage of the revenue budget that they represent. So everyone's familiar with GOB. It's our largest fund. It makes up about 70% of our preliminary 24 revenue budget, made up primarily of property and sales taxes. Our grant budgets represents about 23% of the budget in a couple different buckets, local, state, and federal. Typically, our title and entitlement budgets are the largest, but of late, the ESSER funds have kind of been the largest. We are managing probably 50 to 60 grants in a year. And you can just see some of the larger grants in those different categories. Debt service represents about 7% of the revenue budget. And it's used to pay the interest and principal on our outstanding bonds. Speaking of bonds, you'll notice under bond funds, no percentage for 24. That's because we're actually going to be issuing those Prop S bonds next month. So that $135 million will come to us this current year. As a matter of fact, there is a board resolution that will need to be signed next month at the March 24th meeting. And in addition, I did want to announce that, very exciting, the district has received our first underlying rating, credit rating by S&P. So we got a AA minus credit rating, which is terribly exciting. And I quote, "It is due primarily to robust reserve position, good financial management practices and policies featuring long-term financial planning and a formal reserve policy." So we just want to stay on that train. Okay, so that's just a really high overview of the revenues, just a few things on the expenditures that we kind of know right now. Effective July 1, 2023, there's a negotiated 3% salary increase. We are looking to use a weighted student formula for our GOB school funding, similar to what we did with the ESSER 2 funding that was out in the schools. And of course, the Proposition S expenditures, they will start in earnest probably in the summer, but we anticipate spending about $30 million through next year. And of course, Mr. Square Watson has talked quite a bit about the Prop S projects, and we have the oversight committee, and there will be lots of more information to come. So here is a big, large overview of our preliminary 24 budgets as compared to our projected revenue budgets for the current fiscal year and what was approved this year. So there's still lots of work to be done for this year, so that's why we call it preliminary. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to be bringing a GOB budget amendment in April. But overall, we are looking for approximately $455 million of revenue next year as compared to what we're projecting this year. That's about a $150 million decrease. Most of that is due to the $135 million of Prop S funds. You'll note also that GOB, there's pretty big swing in the current year projection as compared to what was approved. Most of that is due to property taxes, state aid, and E-rate. And as you compare that to the preliminary GOB budget for next year, again, it's going to be state revenue and E-rate. State and federal grants, the big swing from what was approved this year to what we project will actually be spent. Most of that is ESSER funds. We had budgeted most of the ESSER funds, and we're just not going to be able to get through that. Whatever's not used will flow. Well, ESSER 2, this is the year for ESSER 2. So we're spending all those ESSER 2 dollars this year. We're spending them. And for next year, ESSER 3, will be the target, and we'll be making sure that we spend all of those as well. So the next slide is just a chart depicting the source of revenues, locals, county, state, and federal. I think everyone's aware that local is the largest category, which is primarily property and sales taxes. Of course, there are a number of other things in there. As we move on and look to what we need to do as far as our expenditures, we've already distributed workbooks out to the cabinet when they're filling in what they want for the year, their requests. Those are in. March is just a heavy month. There's going to be staffing reviews, looking at the different grant and debt allocations and really pulling all the stuff together. We pretty much have a pretty good handle on the revenues. And now we'll be pulling all of the expenditure requests and information together to build the budgets, because we will be presenting that to the board in April. So kind of our next steps after tonight, we are going to have a virtual budget forum on March 15th. That'll be held in this room. Says 11 o'clock, it might be 10 o'clock, not sure, 10 or 11 o'clock a.m., but it will be live streamed and posted on the website. Anyone that wants to attend, they can certainly come here and be here. We'll be answering questions if people have questions. Also, for the month of March, it's going to be an online public comment period. So we're certainly looking forward to the community providing any input, not just on Prop S, but on any of the budgets. We typically get quite a few comments. So we'll be looking at those and incorporating as much as makes sense into the proposed budgets, which we will present on April 11th and hope to have approval on May 9th. Questions?
The budget forum. So I know last year, would you have maybe like 2 people show up in 3 forums?
Or -1.
Okay, not even that. You and Dr. Adams, and I don't know, maybe Lori was there. Lori was there. So if we do this virtually, can people participate virtually? So will they have to come here and you're going to live stream it, or is there a way that they can like do a big Zoom call?
Yeah, we are going to live stream it, and we did have questions that we had a moderator, so we answered questions that people had sent in. So yes.
Okay. I mean, I still don't know if there's any interest in it, but it's good to make the effort. And I'm glad that, can we refer to it now as the award-winning annual financial report?
Yeah.
I always skip to the end and read the tax abatements and then go backwards, but congratulations, that's great.
Thank you.
So I noticed there's a big difference in both federal and local this year. Usually federal is smaller and local is bigger. Is that mostly due to the ESSER funds and pandemic relief, ARPA funds?
On that chart?
Yeah, the pie chart.
Yes. Yes, federal, the biggest piece is probably ESSER, and it has all the other entitlement funds in there as well. But yes, we typically, pre-ESSER, we were spending maybe $50 to $60 million in federal funds, but now we're up to 90.
So that's all going away when?
September 2024.
Okay.
So the state contribution is 5% of our budget. Is that proportion kind of the same for all school districts, or?
No.
How does it?
No.
Can you speak on that just a
No,
smidge?
we don't have very much state revenue anymore, and that's really due to the charters and the way that the state funding is distributed to the charters. But in that chart, it's more than just the state aid. We do have some state grants that also make up that 5% or whatever it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Financial Officer Angie Banks. We appreciate your intentional delivery of our preliminary budget for 23-24. So I'd like to invite our pillar leads up in response to the work that we're doing as part of MSIP 6. Our goal with our comprehensive school improvement plan, transformation plan, is to ensure that we do receive the 30 points in MSIP 6, 100% of those points. And so our goal and our commitment to the board is to ensure that each month we bring you an update very specific to alignment, coherence, interdependence, and how we're monitoring our progress toward goal attainment. So I'm going to invite our pillar leads up to the podium, and I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Cheryl Van Noy.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, the pillar leads and I are going to share our comprehensive school improvement plan with you, gearing up for the future. This is a really cool slide that we wanted to share, and we wanted to highlight what the North Star is for each of the pillars. This is what we want to have laser-like focus with, and this is what we will be reaching for. The North Star for each pillar is listed on the screen. This is a very busy slide. I apologize, but what I wanted you to see is how we have correlation between each of the pillars and through a coherence concept. While only one activity is displayed, there are multiple ways that the pillars are connected and overlap. For instance, with pillar 2 on the bottom left, they assist and work together with pillar 3 in regards to supporting initiatives for mental health for staff. Another example is with pillar 5 on the bottom right. They assist and work together with pillar 4 with OASIS volunteers and their activities in the classrooms. So now we'll start with pillar 1, monitoring spotlight. We have 4 goals on pillar 1. Goal 1 is directly related to the metrics from MSIP 6 for full accreditation at the district and school level. A couple of our KPIs or key performance activities include the monitoring and analysis of weekly ADA and 90/90 attendance. It is challenging in that attendance has not recovered since the pandemic. The KPI or key performance indicator is aligned to the ADA and 90/90 percentages and is labeled in progress because it occurs throughout the entire school year. The second highlight is aligned to the same goal, but aligned to the transportation audit that will be conducted by the Council of Greater City Schools in April, which is the KPA or the key performance activity. The KPI deals with less drivers calling off on a daily basis and the reduction in vacancies. The status on this goal is also in progress. Internally, this is a representation of the many data points that we track on a periodic basis. You can see some daily, weekly, some 3 times a year, and others quarterly, by semester, or annually. For instance, as stated on the previous slide, we monitor attendance on a daily basis, along with the call-offs and late buses through Mr. Watson's department. Tonight, you heard from Ms. Banks discussing the fiscal year preliminary 2024 budget, which is also aligned to goal 2 in our pillar. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from Mr. Burton regarding the recent HR audit by the Council of Greater City Schools. And this aligns to this pillar's goal 3 with teacher recruitment, retention rates, and vacancies. STAR assessments are reported 3 times a year with teacher attendance and grade distributions quarterly. At semester, we also look at grade distribution reports. We review and report and monitor the results from the district and school's annual performance report on an annual basis. And we also look at the item benchmark descriptors, or the IBDs, that shows how we did on the state standards related to depth of knowledge questions, type of questions asked, and the actual MLS or Missouri Learning Standard. This is a data slide that shows the goals on the far left. In the middle is a goal sheet for an actual school in St. Louis Public School District. It outlines the state's MAP Performance Index, or MPI. It outlines the district MPI and also that school's score. According to the latest metrics, this specific school would have earned 4 of 12 points in the category. And you can see on the bottom, the goal is set to increase the MPI to 381, which would garner 6 points rather than 4. On the upper right hand of the slide is the ADA for the complete month of January by day. What's interesting is our highest attendance every month has been a Thursday. And I spoke with Mr. Watson a few weeks ago, and he said, Cheryl, that's the day we have less call-offs by the bus drivers. Below that is the goal sheet for the 90-90 attendance. Now on the bottom right, you'll see that we are 5.6 higher than we were the same time last year related to 90-90. Now I will hand it over to Dr. Crapo, who will discuss Pillar 2.
Thank you, Ms. Vanoy. So Pillar 2 is all about advancing fairness and equity across the system. So I want to highlight 2 of the 4 goals this evening in our Pillar 2 monitoring spotlight. The first is around equitable access to gifted education. And so currently the Gifted Office and their team they've developed a framework to manage and implement a system to universally screen all of our second grade students. And this has been completed. What is currently in progress is the actual screening. So currently, as of today, 37 out of 39 of our elementary schools, all of our second graders have been screened. And prior to spring break, we have 2 more elementary schools. Those schools will have the screening as well. In terms of equitable student health access, SLPS will provide access to medical care for all of our students through telehealth medical services. And so one of the things we're tracking with this goal is making sure that we're providing the telehealth training to our nurses and or our medical designees in all of our schools to ensure they understand the significance of this program and actually how to use it. And so our goal currently, we're in progress, is that 80% of our school nurses and medical designees are trained on this telehealth service. So this pillar, like I said, has 4 goals, and they really touch almost all areas of our district. And so you can see a couple of several of the areas that we're tracking. So we're looking at our mental health providers. So the number of mental health providers, we're looking at the results of their services to our schools. Additionally, like I mentioned, we're tracking the number of our second graders who have been screened by our universal screener. We're also tracking the number of students who are tested for gifted, the number of students who qualify for gifted services, and then additionally looking at how many students and families are utilizing our telehealth program, and then finally the number of AP and elective courses we're offering to our students. And so this is a snapshot the data that we're tracking across our 4 goals. So a couple that I want to bring your attention to. So if you look at Hazel Health data, so that is our virtual telehealth service. One of the things that we're tracking is not only the schools that have launched it, but the schools that actually have completed visits. So you see that 18 of our schools have completed telehealth visits. I think one of the things to highlight here is that of the students who have participated in this virtual telehealth service, 67% of those students have remained in school, which is really one of the purposes of this, is to make sure that our students have access to a doctor and that if it's something that can be addressed at school, they can still stay at school. So we've saved just from those students who have utilized it 177 hours. So we're working with Deputy Willis's team to ensure that our communication is strong around this service to ensure that our families are utilizing it. So I mentioned the gifted screening. I said that 37 out of 39 of our elementary schools have participated in the screening. To date, 10% of our second grade students have qualified for further testing. And so that means they have the option, if their parents consent, their parents can take them down to the gifted office for further gifted testing, or they can be tested at their school site by a gifted tested examiner. In terms of mental health services, one of the things we wanted to highlight is our social emotional curriculum, Sown to Grow. So we have 62 of our schools engaged, 750 teachers are participating, 8,000 students, 47,000 student reflections as a result of the social emotional curriculum. So every day they're able to reflect and give feedback on how they're feeling, how they're doing. And then finally, in terms of elective courses, we've seen in our high priority high schools a 5% increase from last year to this year in our elective courses. So I will turn this over to Mr. Burton and Dr. Berry for Pillar 3.
Good evening. We are looking at Pillar 3, leaders who foster culture responsive learning environments.
And so we looked at 5 goals as well. So our first goal, we had 33% of our newly hired leaders going through a SOPS sponsored pipeline. So what we have currently, we have 3 programs where our newly hired leaders are actually going through, and also aspiring leaders. And we're hoping to turn these programs into actual pipelines, so where our aspiring leaders can become our future leaders. Additionally, looking at the 84% of the teaching force, we'll talk about later how over the past couple of years, we kind of taggered around 83%, but after the post-pandemic from last year, we are now at 78.3%, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that looks like that. However, we are doing some creative and unique and exciting things to boost up our retention rate. We are looking at our sponsored pipelines for not just our current staff that already have degrees and certifications, but for our non-certificated staff members, because we know they have been with us quite a long time. In addition, we're looking at equity pay, attendance, and retention incentives. Now, the next 3, we kind of can group them together because they go hand in hand. When we're looking at the 75% of our school leaders who talk about they want to rate central office supports as being highly satisfied with student discipline, and also looking at reducing the amount of out-of-school suspensions by 10%, and then the amount of students who have more than 2 suspensions by 30%. We're going to look at that student discipline that our staff say. We're looking at the panorama survey. In addition, we are working closely with Student Support Services, our Culture and Climate Coordinator, and Technology to look at supports, the data, and how we're going to implement the culture responsive approaches. We are going to monitor this. So the first 2, we're going to look at those annually, meaning our once a year, we're going to look at the new teachers that we're training, as well as our retention rates. We will look at the panorama survey in addition to what our principals are saying, how they're satisfied about our supports quarterly. And then backing that up with the data, we're looking at the out-of-school suspensions. We're going to look at that monthly. And this is just some of the data that supports the goals that we have in place. So I know we talked about that we're going to mention the 78.3% retention rate. So looking at that number from the 21-22 school year. So we looked at that number originally in August. It talked about retirement being the number 1 reason why our teachers were not staying with us. However, as recent as February, retirement is now number 2. The number 1 reason is working conditions, retirement, and then coming in 3 is personal and family matters. And then you delve a little bit more looking at working conditions. It talked about number 1 being workload and responsibilities, support and student discipline, and our school-wide policies. And looking at support and student discipline, that goes hand in hand right with our goals. And so if you look up that box in the right corner, it talks about the number of students with 2 or more suspensions. And that last number, the data supports it. You'll see in the 21-22 school year, it almost tripled the amount of students that had more than 2 suspensions and that 19-20 school year. So that's how we got to those goals. And then finally, looking on some uphill data. If you look at those culture and climate surveys, the last one we took in the fall, it did show that students are feeling like they're belonging. That's more favorable at 64%, as well as our relationship with the leaders and the quality of feedback, those also increased. And we're hoping that this next survey, which will be done in March, will also show higher results. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Pillar 4, Dr. Smith Jr.
And so if we take a look at Pillar 4, I like to say that Pillar 4 represents the core business of our school district, which is learning and teaching. And so we have actually 5 goals for Pillar 4, but the goal spotlighted this evening is goal number 2 around curriculum and instruction K through 12. This goal serves as the foundation for ensuring that as a school district, we provide a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So just a bit of context, prior to school year 21-22, the textbook adoption process was limited in development, resulting in some of our textbooks having not been updated in 10 years or more. So last school year, we implemented a 5-year reoccurring textbook adoption calendar that was developed and is being implemented. This textbook adoption process and calendar will bring before the board recommendations of textbooks, across each content area on a regular schedule to ensure that the most up-to-date and current textbooks and curricular resources are in our classrooms. And so turning your attention to the Pillar 4 monitoring spotlight goal, which is each scholar having access to grade level content within current curriculum resources 100% of the time, we spotlight the strategic activity and progress associated with it. So the key action item is conducting a curriculum equity audit. This goal has actually been met, or the action has actually been completed. Our key performance indicators will be ongoing each year as our curriculum committee meets as part of the textbook adoption process, as they apply the equity framework and the equity index protocols to engage in the textbook and instructional materials adoption process. Like all of our other pillars, we're looking at internal data points to track a variety of, or to track our progress toward this goal. Data points being used are noted on this particular slide, along with the frequency of how we're using that particular data to review and to inform our decision-making. I want to bring our attention to this slide here. Left-hand side shows the 5 goals that have been called out, ranging from early childhood education, pre-K through 12 curriculum and instruction, blended learning and virtual learning technology integration, college career readiness, and our ESOL English language learners. But we're spotlighting goal number 2 today, which is around K through 12 curriculum and instruction. And so one of the things that we started with was really looking at how are we ensuring that the appropriate resources are in the hands of our particular scholars. And so I want to bring our attention to some progress that's made in this particular area with that curriculum equity audit. As part of this work, the evidence shows, I'm sharing an example just from one course, English 2, as noted on the right-hand side of the slide, some of the shifts and changes that have been made in our thinking, some of the conversations we've been having, and the actions about the textbooks and curriculum resources we are bringing into our classroom. So specifically, you see 4 specific data points. The first one is the expansion of core literacy text resources that were made available to our teachers to promote scholar voice and choice. The second is the gender representation of those core textbooks of the authors. We now have about a 50% representation between male and female authors. The third data point we have are our curriculum plans have been updated in each of our content areas so that we have tier 2 and tier 3 supports called out specifically in those curriculum plans. And lastly, that 4th data point has increased our ethnic and linguistic representation of authors that we're using for the core text so that we have diversity of representation across all of the core text that we use. And one final piece I wanted to share is our ultimate goal with this is, of course, student growth and proficiency. And so on the right-hand side, you see examples of our fall to winter STAR data. And you see that while we are growing in the areas of ELA mathematics, we are still focused on proficiency. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lori Willis, for Pillar 5.
Good evening, everyone. I'm representing Pillar 5, which is growing community partners and resources that support the district's transformation plan. And under the Pillar 5 monitoring, under the Pillar 5 monitoring spotlight, we're talking about some of the community engagement process that we are working on with regard to increasing our volunteers and partners in this space. Our 4 goals concentrate on the increasing the number of volunteers and mentors by 10%, increasing the number of strategic partners, those are partners with MOUs, and increasing the number of active partners that are providing special support. That might be shoes, clothes, personal basic care kits, things like that. And finally, we're going to grow the level of public-private funding over time. And I wanted to, let's see, let me move this forward. Show you a little bit about how we're tracking those things. Some of the more immediate things we're going to be tracking on a daily basis, and others on a weekly. We're very, very strong in the analytics in our department with regard to marketing and comms, so we're able to keep track of social on a regular basis and find out what kind of response we're getting across the board on a lot of our projects and programs that are key to supporting many of the pillars. Some of them you heard a little bit about earlier. This slide goes over our goals, but it also calls out things that we are working on right now. we are working on a volunteer onboarding program that would involve a pilot program and QR codes that would allow the volunteers to check in, check out, and to provide feedback on their experience. We do training and onboarding here in our 108 room in our offices. We support the OASIS tutoring program and others, but we also train our FCSs because they are our faces at the school district. They're at the schools that they serve. So we work very closely with them. And our Director of Volunteer and Mentoring Services, Ryan L. Jackson, does involve them, and they are key to the welcoming of our volunteers when they go into the schools. When we talk about our public funding, I have not listed the foundation's funding numbers yet, but they typically are added in as we go forward in this process. Right now, I can show you that we're on track at this point in time to keep funding and to meet what we were able to do last year at about 1.3. But we don't have the final numbers yet, of course, but we will be trending toward that. Again, more information will be coming on the foundation side. Our nonprofit partners are about to be treated to a partner fair because we're going to be bringing them in for a spring partner event that will allow us to pair them with our principals and to work with them to find out exactly what schools need and what the right fits are. And we're planning that through our development office, and that will be coming up in the spring. I pulled out a couple of marketing and communications highlights because there are several programs that are ongoing now that support the various pillars. And I've called out this one, the particular Spring 22 teacher hiring campaign, because you can see that the analytics there show that we were making a difference in that regard, and we'll try and beef that up every time we go back for the next campaign. Active volunteers, we have about 4,700, and they are divided on the categories that you see there, project-based. About 45% are project-based. Those are the tutors, the mentors, chess clubs, reading, life skills support, sporting activities, anybody that supports those types of events. And our more informal volunteers, that would be people who come to our schools on a regular basis. They know the school community and they interact like our parents, for instance. We have guest speakers coming in at 10% and seasonal volunteers coming in at 15%. We do have an honor and recognition program for volunteers, and we intend to expand on that. We're looking at May for this year. We have lost a few of our partners. We used to say that we had 398 partners. We're now somewhere around 200. And that's partly, I needed to mention that that's partly why we really need to do the partner fair. When we do the partner fair, we also teach them about MOUs and all the things they need to know to help them work with our district more effectively. That's the one I want. This is a highlight of the cross-functional work that's being done among the teams. Ms. Renoy showed you a chart earlier that had a lot of different graphs on it. I did it a little different way for our department because Pillar 5 has, sometimes it takes us a while to get some of our numbers through so that we can give a report or give a chart or a graph. So basically, if you can see down the left side, I've listed the pillars 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then key performance actions are what Pillar 5 is trying to work on now to support those pillars. And I'll call out, you heard some of my colleagues mention Prop S. We have created a dashboard for Prop S so that parents and community will be able to follow what's happening in all of our schools. Recruitment planning is underway, and it's going hand in hand with enrollment because we're expanding our enrollment information initiatives so that parents can have a more user-friendly way of enrolling. Hazel Health, they mentioned that earlier, that's our telehealth program. So those are some of the things that the other pillars mentioned that we are working on and actively engaged in. We also have a couple of campaigns coming up that will tie into particularly Pillar 1 and 2, but anti-bullying, Power of Pre-K, Camp SLPS, and now hiring. And on the right-hand side, you'll see measurement. This is how we plan to continue measuring. And my colleagues in 1, 2, 3, and Pillar 4 will help us make sure that we are measuring accurately as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Board members, I know there's a lot of information in this and they'll be back, but if you have questions, maybe send them an email and then we'll come back to this because I didn't want to get to the HR audit. But thank you all very much. It's a lot of info. And like I said, we'll compile some written questions and we can talk about that the next time you come visit.
Perfect. Thank you very much, President Davis. So I just want to quickly say our goal is to create a coherent, unified, forward-focused vision, tracking progress and sharing data. And so on a monthly basis, the board will receive an update with respect to our CSIP transformation plan. So last but certainly not least, I know adult learning theory says we need to probably stand up and breathe and stretch and then sit back down. So any board members who feel so inclined to do so, please do. Adult learning theory says we need to do that. So thank you, Ms. Jones, for complying, and we'll stand up, and anyone else who needs to do this, absolutely. Brain research says that we have to do that and move around a little bit, right, to increase our oxytocin levels. Thank you again. I'm going to invite our Chief of Human Resources, Mr. Charles Burton, and the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools, Dr. Ray Hart, who flew in, I understand, from Washington, D.C. this afternoon to be with us. So I want to say thank you so much for being here. The last presentation this evening under the interim superintendent's presentations is the HR audit. And so I'm going to turn it over respectfully to Mr. Burton and Dr. Hart to take us through the HR audit. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, board. Again, Charles Burton. As you know, this board commissioned the Council of Great City Schools to review HR functions. And Mr. Hart wanted to be here himself to present initially tonight, and then we'll talk about next steps after he goes through the report. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, Mr. Davis, members of the board. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Again, my name is Ray Hart. I'm the executive director with the Council of the Great City Schools, and happy to share the report on human resource department that you requested. For those of you who aren't familiar with the council is a membership organization of which St. Louis is a member of 78 of the largest urban school districts in the country. Of those 78, quite frequently, our districts will ask us to come in and do an audit of various services. As a matter of fact, we have another human resources audit going on right now in a different council member district. Over the last about 2 decades, we've probably done 350 or so of these types of audits in all aspects of school operations, transportation. We do food services, we do academics, English language learners, special education, a number. Over the past year and a half or so, probably the largest number of audits we've been asked to conduct, or we call them strategic support teams, that we've been asked to conduct have been in human resources. A lot of that is a function of some of the pressure that's been placed on human resource departments coming out of the pandemic with staffing challenges that our districts have faced. So just know that what we share right now will be a report about improvements, continuous improvement in the district, about getting better, but it is not necessarily reflective of, again, the challenges that the district faces, because it is common across our member districts. So what we'll share is ways that you might be able to get better. When we do these audits, one of the things that we do when we conduct these audits is we do come in as staff. So we do them as a part of the council staff, but we also bring in those who serve in similar positions from our member districts around the country. So I want to thank those who volunteered their time to come and spend time here in St. Louis reviewing your processes. They came in from other districts from around the country. We do that so that other practitioners from around the country are actually taking a look at the work that you do. So it's those who are actually doing the work on the ground in large urban school districts around the country that are providing the advice and the recommendations that I'll share with you tonight. So I want to first thank our staff. Our staff member who came in was Willie Burrows. He is the Director of Management Services with the council, and he formerly served as the Chief Operations Officer in San Antonio Independent School District, as well as other school districts in the council. Gifty Beats was the Assistant Chief Human Resource Officer in Los Angeles Unified School District. Paul Itzvog is the Chief Human Resources and Labor Relations Officer in Fresno Unified School District. Debbie Ignagne is the Deputy Chief Retired of Human Resources in Los Angeles. Kansi McCarn is the Chief Human Resources Officer in Sacramento, and Sharon Reese, who came in as a Chief Human Resources Officer in Portland Public Schools. So I want to thank them for their time. I'll start first and foremost with commendations. We did look at a number of different operations in the district. Not all of them are reported here. There were several that we found. We highlighted these. So there are a number of positive aspects of what's currently going on in the department. First of all, and I won't read through all of these, but employee relations services was highly disregarded by your, highly regarded by your staff. The department has created a 90-day boot camp to begin to cross-train staff. You'll see some recommendations that I'll share in a moment to extend some of those cross-training opportunities. In addition to that, recruiting teachers has been improved significantly, particularly looking at standing up programs to recruit a diverse teacher population. The CHRO has developed a working environment around creating mental check-ins with the staff, et cetera. And then there's an interim learning associate and a building learning associate positions that were created to begin to address some of the challenges coming out of the pandemic. So those are some of the things that we found that were positive. I'll share in 3 different buckets some of our findings. The first bucket is in leadership and management, and then we'll share some others in operations and other areas. So first of all, customer service. I mentioned earlier that there were some positive customer service responses to aspects to individual departments, but there was also some negatives. So the customer service was uneven across the department. And one of the things that we recommended was just looking at shoring up that across the department. Some of that is due to some of the high turnover and just the changes in staff, bringing staff up to speed on different aspects of your processes. In addition to that, there were some implementation components, and I'm going to talk here and also later. There were some components of an enterprise resource planning system that were not implemented, and we're going to talk more about that in detail. ERP systems are basically systems that allow your HR systems, your finance systems, payroll systems to talk to each other. And one of the things that happened as part of that implementation is that some elements were implemented, others were not. And as a result of that, some of your components of the ERP system, when HR, when human resources needs to communicate, for example, with finance or with payroll, because there are different elements that have been implemented, that information doesn't flow as smoothly. So one of the things that you'll see in our recommendation is actually fully implementing an ERP system, and we understand what the challenges of that look like. So when I get to recommendations, we'll talk more about what that looks like. Finally, some employees reported some additional responsibilities were added, but one of the things that we'll recommend in a few minutes is just reviewing job descriptions and going through that to make sure that they're clear across the district. Some other key findings, we're just looking at the site administrators who took a look at internal program identities, preparation, preparing future administrators, really building up what we call pipeline programs for administrators in the district. And so one of the things that we'll recommend is really taking a look at how are you building pipeline programs for your leadership development as individuals matriculate through the district as employees. And then on many occasions, the team heard that staff were pulled to do different jobs across the district. So pulling them away from some of the work that they were required to do into other types of work. And so we'll talk about recommendations. Again, I shared earlier about recommendations around really lifting up a review of job descriptions to make sure those match the actual work that's being done on the ground. In terms of organizational findings, so some of the organizational findings that we identified was we didn't hear evidence of clearly established roles and responsibilities for cross-training. There are, in the previous presentation, you saw some cross-functional teaming. One of the things that we recognized was that across all departments, not all of that cross-functional teaming was as strong as it could possibly be. So we recommended some improvements there, as well as looking at some business practices and structures to ensure all of the services that need to be covered in HR are actually covered. And then finally, one of the things we saw across departments was a siloed mentality where departments are working kind of within themselves. And we recommended, again, cross-functional teams that cut across departments. So both within departments and across departments to shore up communication. Some of that has to do, for example, with the communications that need to happen between human resources and finance, for example, or human resources and IT and other departments. So we'll talk more about that in our recommendations as well. And then finally, operational findings. In terms of operational findings, we heard that there's not always a clear understanding across the district about salary schedules and how those actually play out in human resources. So that's more a communications issue, just to make sure that that's available to all so that there's no perceptions of inequities in pay across the district. I'm going to talk more about this one, but there was a reliance on manual data entry. A lot of that has to do, I mentioned earlier that your ERP systems or your software systems that HR, finance, and others use don't communicate well with each other. What that fosters is actually a need to enter information into the HR system and then turn around and enter the same information into the finance system. So it creates a manual process of entering information. I'll talk, like I said, I'll talk in the recommendations about what it'll take to correct that, but it creates a manual process that becomes labor intensive. The district does not have, again, a system-wide ERP system. I'll talk about that. And the HR department doesn't use metrics or key performance indicators, KPIs. There are some, but there's a number of data elements that as we work with the HR department, we'll share with them that are best practices to collect just in terms of understanding what's happening through your HR processes. For example, one example is as you identify candidates for principals to interview. How many of those candidates are actually pulled into the system and hired? How many of those candidates are lost, perhaps because they weren't interviewed in a timely manner, they found a position in another school district? So collecting that kind of data will help you understand how to shore up your systems and make for a more efficient system within the district. So we'll talk more about that. We provided some recommendations around that. And then last set of key findings around operations are just integrated systems. We talked about that a moment ago, particularly systems around business functions. And with high employee turnover and absenteeism, a lot of that can be impacted because if you have an employee leave, and I'll talk more about this, and you don't have individuals who are cross-trained to do kind of the role that I play, but then other roles as well when necessary, then it creates a lag in the system. And so we'll talk more about that. There are no identifiable systems for really sharing information from exit interviews. We'll talk more about that in a moment and shoring that up, but that's really understanding why are individuals exiting the system and how do you address that? And then consistent processes for onboarding, salary placement, et cetera, can be shored up. And then finally, we heard that applicant tracking system is inefficient and creates competition. So I talked a moment ago about individuals being interviewed as they come into the system. The current system allows for principals to go in and interview candidates, but multiple principals can interview the same sets of candidates. So quite often that might create competition within the system where candidates would be identified by two different principals for jobs in their building. So we'll talk more about how to shore up some of those processes. So recommendations, I will go through the recommendations and then we will turn things over to Mr. Burton to address some of the district's reactions to some of the recommendations that we've already made. Continue to move the Human Resources Department forward by creating a laser focus on customer service and efficiency. And so one of the things that we talked about here is really a sense of urgency around discussions to analyze findings and recommendations recommended in this report, as well as any others that you may have. What I will share with you is as I go through these recommendations and as you look at the recommendations in the report, we do not establish a timeline for going through, and we don't recommend a timeline for going through and identify, do this first, do this second. One of the things that we prefer to do is allow the district to say, here are the elements of the recommendations, the observations from the review. Here's how we will tier, making the improvements to those recommendations, addressing those recommendations. Some of them, such as number B here, which is the developing a strategic plan, is actually a process that we recommend that the district go through. But the process for improvement is actually a 3 to 5 year process. So there are some elements of the process that can be done in short order. There's some recommendations that can be done immediately, such as cross-functional teaming, et cetera. There's others that will take longer. For example, the ERP system that I referred to a few moments ago, the enterprise system of looking at data. That process is actually a long-term process. It takes from start to finish, from procurement to actually implementing process can actually take up to 3 or 4 years. One of the things that we'll talk about with that as well, when I get to, I'll do it now instead of waiting for that recommendation. But with the ERP process in particular, as you begin to look at implementing that, the district will come back to the board and say, here are some things that we need to implement our ERP system. Some of those things include, for example, because the system cuts across multiple departments, it will cut across human resources, it will cut across finance, IT will be involved. It'll actually touch to some extent the student information system. So it cuts across a number of different systems. So best practice when implementing that is actually sometimes to have a project manager oversee that process. And so hiring a project manager who can help keep all the different departments on track. There are other best practices. For example, when you're going to an ERP system, quite often individuals who are in roles, let's say take payroll, for example, they've got to do their role, which is their full-time job of running payroll, but then also help establish what the new system will do in terms of managing payroll. So doing both of those at the same time is often a challenge. And what companies will do is say, we'll have someone sit with you, they'll work with you, learn each of the jobs that you have in payroll and finance and human resources, so that individual can then serve as a buffer and provide payroll support, while your payroll staff then says, here's what needs to happen in the new system so that we can transfer over and mirror what we do. Or what that person will do is that person will say, I'll learn your role and then I'll create what you do in your role in the new system for you. So it works both ways. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating a system, and that's why it takes so much time. You're creating a system that says, I recognize that my employees can't do both of those at the same time, but I've got to stage and stagger how we build out the new system, given where we are in the old system. There are other reasons that I won't share here, but there are other reasons for transitioning systems. You might say, well, why don't we just continue to use the old systems? But the old systems actually, at times, you need to make a transition to newer. For example, the systems now are what we call cloud-based systems, as opposed to systems that are here based in the district. Those systems often come with additional features, additional functions, other things that are important for you to transition to stay up to speed. So those are things that you'll want to think about. The district will share with you, here's where we're going, here's how to update, here's how we need to do the process, but that process takes a long time. So shifting information, shifting away from transactional activities to being proactive are some of the recommendations, and then refining HR department-wide policies and procedures. That's actually something that we recommend all the time, that you always review your policies, your procedures, your standard operating procedures for how we do things, et cetera. Last on this slide, and we'll go through a couple of recommendations quickly and then we'll turn things over. Eliminate the over-reliance on a single person completing specific job functions. And that's where I talked about having kind of overlap and cross-functional training so that individuals can support each other through the process. Implement a systemic review and evaluation of the department's teacher recruitment program. One of the things that we recognize is that the department has put in a recruitment program. We didn't acknowledge that in the commendations, but we do. But we also recognize the need to continue to grow that recruitment program to identify not just local recruiting, but also national recruiting, particularly given the challenges that are faced right now in recruiting of teachers across the country. So those are things that you'll want to invest in and expand. We've got building strategic and coordinated district-wide professional development plan. Human resources ideally should be professional development for the entire district, for all of your employees, not just teachers. And so really looking at how are we lifting up all of our employees across all of our departments. And that's something that the human resource department should champion. Convene with urgency a team of appropriate stakeholders to really look at human resources, finance, payroll. Again, this is a recommendation to create that cross-functional team across divisions to make sure that everyone is clear on what their role is. For example, their role in payroll, their role in hiring, their role in onboarding new employees. So it's really creating a cross-functional team across divisions to make sure that any challenges related to either human resource operations or other district operations are all clarified. So that's something that will be critical moving forward. Continue to strengthen stakeholder and community activities to enhance services in terms of communications, networking, et cetera, across the district. Create opportunities to invite and confer with internal and external stakeholders. Again, this is looking at streamlining procedures, streamlining other implementing programs and measures for not just human resources, but how human resources supports others and meets the customer needs of everyone in the district. And last but not least, monitoring turnover rates. That is, again, the introduction of data. There are a number of other data systems that you can look at, developing a comprehensive plan to boost employee retention and provide opportunities for employees at all levels. That includes, again, I talked earlier about exit surveys and exit interviews, studying the data for why individuals exit the system, and then shoring up those processes to ensure that employees have high job satisfaction. And then last but not least, require that the CHRO is at the table when other key decisions are being made across the district, including potential school closures, enrollment declines. There are a number of things where human resources would need to be at the table as you're making decisions about what's next for the district, how you move forward, et cetera. I'll go through these, but wrap them up. Conduct a study to determine appropriate staffing levels. We talked about future funding needs in the previous slide. Develop a concise reporting relationships to clearly define job titles, roles, that is reviewing in particular reviewing the job descriptions to make sure they're clear, and then maximizing opportunities for cross-training. I talked about that already. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Burton to talk about the action plan, the St. Louis action plan, and then we'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, well, thank you, Ray, for that. Thank you to this board for commissioning this work. It has been sobering and eye-opening, and I think there is an opportunity for us to get better moving forward. We've taken and we've looked at all of the data that's been provided. We've created a spreadsheet that basically pulls out every line, and we're building our response as we see it. There are a number of things that will require policy changes, a number of things that require changes to our practices, a number of things that will require changes in our culture, and then a number of things that are going to require direct action, just something we have to do, like we have to have meetings, once a month or those kinds of things. And so we've looked at all of that, and we bucketed them basically. And I believe that what we're looking at is a 3-phase approach, which we've discussed with the council. They seem to believe makes sense. And so phase 1 is those quick win matters, things that can be addressed prior to the start of the next school year, things that are right in front of us, things that can be done by July 30th. An example of that is instituting a principals focus group with monthly meetings and reporting so that we know that we're meeting principal needs. That's just one example of all those things. The spreadsheet's got like 113 lines. Phase 2's matters that are dependent upon phase 1 or require a year or so to complete. Those are things we would get done by June 30th, 2024. Examples, automating and optimizing current systems. Phase 3 would be matters that are dependent upon phase 2 completion and require more than a year to complete. An example would be identifying and implementing a new ERP system. We have a date for that too. The thing is, and I think you all know this too, a list or a spreadsheet isn't a strategic plan. And so in consultation with the council, what we've said is, yes, you've got this idea, but obviously this has been created very quickly by yourselves. Like, you need to also be in concert. So we've already started meetings with IT and finance to talk about like how we build this. We share the document. We'll be meeting bi-weekly, I think it is, moving forward and at some point we'll get a rhythm and maybe get to monthly meetings, but we'll be meeting bi-weekly here recently, looking at these key findings and recommendations with an eye towards of working with the council, working with an appropriate facilitator and key stakeholders to finalize what will be a strategic plan that we will publish and follow as a blueprint for success. The idea is that that strategic plan will be in line with the transformation plan, with the idea that we would be able to have that strategic plan at least in place and be marching towards that by the end of the summer. And I think there's a few other notes around that. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's it. So I'll take any questions you have.
I just want to say thank you for your willingness to grow and change. I think it's kind of a growing and changing moment for the entire board as we're changing leadership and we're returning to fully elected board. So I think that we have a lot of room to grow. I appreciate you, working on this with us. Just one quick question. Could you send that? It says may be accessed at the following link. Could you send that as an attachment in an email?
Yes, I can.
When you get time.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think I like what I heard you say, Mr. Burton, and I want to go back to the transformation plan and looking at what Mr. Ray and the Council of Gray City has provided. I want to thank you guys for providing this documentation. And I think it kind of supports the overall concerns that I've seen that I'm still kind of struggling with, and that's the silo effect. Looking at the transformation and looking at what's trying to be presented and seeing this actual assessment concerns me to the point that we do have to understand what and how working in silos is really affecting the district. To hear the principals or whomever in one of the surveys that was provided at a 3.0 on a 10 scale, that's concerning. But it also supports where we struggle in that level of separateness with the different pillars that we have to do a better job in working, because we must all understand one cannot survive without the other. And it seems like the culture has been kind of positioned in that way to say, that's not my problem, that's their problem, but all of our problems are kind of in tune to one another and getting us to where we are. I'm like Natalie, I want to definitely commend you for even standing up and going through this. This is a lot. And I've said it several times, even with us as the board and being held for the citywide plan, but we have work to do. And this report itself demonstrates just how serious and how much work we really have before us. COVID did affect a lot of what's going on, but we cannot continue to lean into COVID as the overall factor of why we are where we are. But I will hope, and I like how you've laid out, you know, your phases, you know, first, second, and third phase. What's you kind of prioritize what's important, what we really need to be working on right now. But we do have work to do. So thank you for taking this time. And Mr. Ray, thank you for taking the time to actually get this assessment done. This has been a long time coming. This is something we've been asking for. But it again supports us knowing we have work to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Hart. I know in the report you talked about our policies, so many that haven't been reviewed and updated since 1999. I don't know if you just sort of have, in terms of best practices, how often, especially under the personnel HR category of policies, how often those should be reviewed and updated, generally speaking, in a district like ours?
Yeah, there's no general response, but typically what we see is if we see a standard operating procedure, what we might see is a chart at the end of each of the standard operating procedures that says, here's the date that this procedure was accepted. Here was the last time this standard operating procedure was changed. And then here's when this standard operating procedure needs to be reviewed again. So sometimes for some SOPs, that should be a year. For others, it could be 3 to 5 years, depending upon the standard operating procedure, but each one should have a review date. And the reason for that is quite often, for example, I'll give you an example. If you transition to a new ERP system, some of your old standard operating procedures that are in place right now, given that you've got different places to enter information, et cetera, between finance and HR, those will change. So the new standard operating procedure will be reflective of the fact that those systems now communicate better with each other. So those are examples of why you don't want to keep them in place for long periods of time, because how you actually function and operate will change.
I just wanted to add on the note of policies. I emailed you and Kelly Hopkins. I had been waiting to send that email until we got this presentation, but we've been looking at reviewing all of our policies for the district. So we are hoping to start with HR. So hopefully that'll help you out, give you some updated framework to work within. So yeah.
So I'm glad you asked that, Matt and Nellie, that you came back with that. I think that's kind of presenting us where we are. We've basically been operating with old policies. And based on the assessment that has been done with HR is demonstrating why the outdated policies have really affected what we're trying to get done. That's safe to say.
It's possible. It's possible. But again, it's why you want to review it. It's not just the district standard operating policy. Sometimes it's board policy as well that needs to be reviewed to make sure that the board policy is reflective of where you want to be currently.
Yeah, and I kind of want to echo what Tony said too. You know, if we've been talking to a lot of principals lately, just, you know, stopping by buildings, talking to them. And this is always one of their biggest concerns. I mean, obviously, staffing is an issue, but getting the customer service that they need from down here to help them deal with their staffing issues has really been a stress point for them. I mean, really been a stress point for them, the way that they express it and articulate it to us. It's one of their biggest concerns. You know, they'll say things like, they have to come down here and talk to somebody and like to get answers to their questions. And they've got so much else to do, you know, in terms of attendance, teaching math and English and all the other data, doing the panorama surveys and all of that. I really think if you can sort of solve that puzzle, it's going to really help a lot, and we'll see effects at the building level. So we're here to support you on all that stuff, and we're rooting for you, like I've said before.
Definitely.
So thank you very much, Dr. Hart. Thank you
Thank
for
you very much.
traveling
Thank
in
you for
and
having us.
being with us this afternoon, this evening. Thank you, Mr. Burton. Our goal is to continue to work together so we can recruit, support, retain the highest quality staff members to do this work as we center equity and excellence in all that we do. That concludes the interim superintendent's reports. President Davis, thank you very much.
All right, March consent agenda review. I'm trying to be energetic at this time. And Mr. Watson's like 100 degrees in here, so I don't know what you're doing to us.
We need coffee service, iced coffee service.
Questions about items on the consent agenda? We've got a little bit of a crowd left. So they may want to answer questions. Any follow-up questions from what we've already asked? Going once. Okay, having no questions, we will move on to professional development request. There's a professional development request for Ms. Val to fulfill her obligation as our designee to the Missouri School Boards Association Board to attend the nominating committee meeting on February 27th, 2023. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second that motion to approve that professional development request. Mrs. Henry.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Board member reports, committee reports.
I just have something quick. I did have an opportunity to go see the outstanding work that Brian Hill did in regards to their Black History Month program. The students did an excellent job. They put in a lot of work on that particular program, kind of showcasing their journalism skills and their media skills. So I was very impressed with that. I also had the opportunity to go to Shenandoah and see the program that Shenandoah actually have. It was very interesting. One of our students wrote a poem, and she actually recited the poem at the citywide education community meeting. And I found it phenomenal that the first and second graders of Shenandoah were actually rehearsing and they learned that poem, and that was part of their Black History Month presentation. So you never know who's listening and who's paying attention. And I think that young lady was a fourth grader who actually wrote that poem, and now she's teaching first and second graders the poem. So I thought that was very interesting and very impressive. So I just wanted to report on that.
Natalie, do you want to talk about long, middle?
I'll leave that to you because I had to leave early.
I believe Miss Willis set up for us, invited the board. So Miss Val, Miss Sonia, and myself went to Long Middle School to see their Verizon Innovation STEM lab. We saw some robots here today. It was really a beautiful facility. Or beautiful room in there. The students were incredibly engaged, and the teacher was incredibly engaged. The principal was very excited. So it was great to see what they're doing at Long Middle. We then took a tour of the building. The building is going to need some Prop S work real bad. I'm sorry, Mr. Watson kept avoiding me. So that room is like the model. If the whole school could look like that, I think that's what we deserve. And so I think that that's a goal, but really great to see that school and those kids in action. So thank you for the invite. I also did want to point out today that a group of about 50 students from Central Visual and Performing Arts, along with their teachers, I think they're led mostly by social studies and government teachers, went to Jefferson City. Because at CVPA, they brought their instruments, they brought their artwork, but because they were government and social studies class, they also engaged with legislators to talk about the legislative process, their disappointment in the legislative process, and the failure that there's been any action relating to any sort of reasonable gun control that has any hope of passing in Jefferson City. This sort of came out of a meeting that we had with the teachers who asked, well, what do we do? And can we go to Jeff City? And I'm like, sure. And I text Dr. Williams, like, I hope that's okay. And so they did it, and they did it. I wasn't able to go. Gloria Nolan went. I think George and Sean went. But and I was texting with Representative Meredith, of course, who has had family members who graduated from CVPA. His niece teaches there. And so I hope that at least the students felt that they were heard and seen. It's rough up there. It's rough. It's rough up there to go up there and just get sort of dismissed because you don't come from a special interest. You aren't well backed. You're not going to make campaign contributions. But I think it's important that you know, our representatives hear from their constituents. And while these kids can't vote, they will. And they're going to remember this experience. So that serves as the legislative committee update for tonight. Are there any other updates? With that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
Make motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.